Audiobook by Fate's Reader. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel for more epic series. Drop your recommended novel below. We love to know what you want to hear next. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 521, First Ancestor Human Emperor. Up ahead was a figure that was tall and sturdy. Qin Mu walked up the steps of the sacred hall with the chest clattering behind him. He raised his hand, and the chest stopped outside, pulled back its four legs and landed on the floor. The chest creaked as its top opened up. In the gap, the dragon Qilin looked around and saw tombstones everywhere. He gave it some thought before crawling out with difficulty. His stomach stayed close to the ground as he followed Qin Mu while his tail was lowered, but not to the point it touched the floor. He didn't dare to make a sound. Suddenly, the dragon Qilin felt something stepping on his tail and let out a shriek. The hair and scales on his body all rose up. Qin Mu turned back to take a look and saw the dragon Qilin with both his paws stuffed in his mouth. Only then did he make himself from making the noise. When he turned back, he saw the chest tiptoeing behind him. It was this thing that had stepped on his tail and scared the hell out of him. Qin Mu's head started to ache, and he wanted to chase them out, but he felt like it wouldn't be appropriate in such a sacred and solemn place. He could only brace himself and let them follow behind him. If you two fool around again, I'll turn one of you into firewood and the other into dinner. When he came to the back of the figure, only then did he realize that he was much shorter than the other party. As a youth, he was merely an inch shorter. However, the impression that the figure gave him was of a very tall person. It was the impact the person's aura and manner brought to his heart. The figure belonged to First Ancestor Human Emperor, whose stone statue Qin Mu had seen in Little Jade Capital. You should be the 36th Human Emperor, right? First Ancestor tilted his head to look at him. He was a man who looked to be in his 30s. He had a full beard and looked robust, radiating the aura of reliability. I'm the 37th, Qin Mu corrected. Village Chief is my master and the person who had taken me in, but this is still the first time I've come here. He looked forward and was slightly stunned. He realized at what First Ancestor Human Emperor had been looking. It was rows and rows of bookshelves stored with countless books. Hall of Human Emperor was very huge, but it didn't have any gold or jade accessories like Qin Mu had expected. There was no tall and majestic god statue or any luxury at all. There were only rows and rows of bookshelves. He walked forward and picked up a book. The words written on it were unfamiliar to him, but he could feel a familiar kind of sword will from them. It was a book that Village Chief had written. In it, he talked about the techniques and divine arts of High Heaven's Star Sovereign Xiao. He had written numerous weaknesses of them and studied their flaws. Qin Mu returned the book to its place and picked up another one. On it was written numerous pros and cons of Jade Sovereign's techniques and divine arts. He flipped through the other books, and most of them were experiences of facing the techniques of the gods of high heavens. Qin Mu even found sword picture. There was a big pile of scrolls which recorded how Village Chief had cultivated his sword picture. The path and the mood of every kind of sword skill were recorded inside, which made it evident that he had prepared it for the descendants. The youth came to the second bookshelf where the words were filled with a boundless atmosphere. It had a kind of passion that was like volcanoes erupting, so the books there were most likely written by Human Emperor Qikong. His were also mostly about the techniques of the gods of high heavens as well as the way to face them calculated by him. Besides that, the rest were the techniques and divine arts of Human Emperor Qikong. However, he mentioned that anyone who would cultivate his techniques would be an idiot. He had never defeated the gods of high heavens, so cultivating his techniques would only allow one to walk the same path as him. There was a hint of disappointment in his words. No wonder every human emperor wouldn't cultivate the technique of their master, but instead insist on founding new techniques. Qin Mu suddenly understood the feelings of the past human emperors. They were all failures and didn't want their disciples to walk their old path. The reason they left their techniques was probably because they were the hard work of their whole lives. They wanted to have a successor, but it couldn't be their own disciple. This was probably their biggest regret. These books are all strategies on how to pacify high heavens. First Ancestor Human Emperor walked over and caressed the books on the bookshelves. They viewed high heavens as their biggest enemy and used all their effort to take it down. However, it's a pity that all of them failed. You can stay here and study for some time. It will help you in finding your own path. Qin Mu shook his head. The gods of high heavens are mostly dead. All of the 4 sovereigns already gone. The high heavens now is not a big problem anymore. The books in these bookshelves are no longer of much use. My goal isn't the gods of high heavens or the conqueror of that place. First ancestor human emperor looked at him with astonishment. What is your goal? Qin Mu looked straight at this predecessor and said solemnly, My goal is to tear apart this fake sky, to reform this unfair world, to seek advancement with reform, to rebuild a flourishing era that doesn't belong to founding emperor. His gaze was fervent when he asked loudly, First ancestor, this is also your goal, right? No, first ancestor's eyes dimmed, and he shook his head. My ideal is not as ambitious as yours. I've been worn down by time and many enemies. You are still young and have the drive while I'm just a dispirited old man. The day will come when time and your enemies will wear you out too. When that time comes, you will come to Hall of Human Emperors and leave your book like the other human emperors. You will write down your failures and hope for your descendant to do what you couldn't. His voice was slightly cold and grew crueler and crueler with each word. You are a failure just like them. You will quietly build a straw hut and sit in it with all hope lost. You won't want for anyone to walk the same path as you. But the responsibility of the human emperor will make you have no choice but to find a successor. In the straw hut, you will shed tears of regret. You will hate the master you respect, and you will carve a tombstone for yourself on which you will write your failures. He sneered and said, You'll feel that you're unworthy of a grave, unworthy of meeting your ancestor. Then you will take your last breath and become like the other skeletons in the straw huts. Qin Mu stared with his eyes wide open, full of disbelief. The heroic and wise image of first ancestor human emperor suddenly crumbled in his heart. Do you still want to be the human emperor? Let me tell you a cruel truth. There's no human emperor in this world. His voice was cold to the extreme. Back then, when I saved my people from the big disaster, I already knew that I was a failure. I saved them because I was weak and couldn't see these ordinary people die in front of me. However, that made me a deserter. He laughed loudly and pointed at the countless burial mounds in the fog outside Hall of Human Emperors. I am a deserter. When escaping, all I thought about was how to leave that hell. So I escaped. I didn't fight with them, but run away alone. I've thought about it countless times. What if I had stayed with them at that time? There's only one answer to that, and that's I'd have become a corpse just like them. He laughed a little maniacally. That's right, they died while I lived and became the human emperor in the hearts of the world. The people respect me because I brought them to a place where they could live, but so what? I only turned them into prisoners. Even the sky is fake in this huge cage, an inescapable prison. Everyone is just a prisoner in this cage. I didn't bring them out, but only sent them into this prison of gods. Human emperor? Haha, human emperor. There's no such thing as a human emperor in this world. His hair blew upwards from the anger, and he took a step forward. When he closed in on Qin Mu, his terrifying aura forced the youth to fall back continuously. Throw away that laughable dream of yours and let go of your burden. You are not the human emperor. From the beginning to the end, the human emperor was a fake, merely a murderer who had sent the people of the world to the cage of gods. His aura didn't allow Qin Mu to even breathe. He had no choice but to use his vital qi at full strength to fight back. Then why have you come back? Qin Mu's chest was almost compressed, and he could barely suck in a breath, but she still shouted out, Why have you come back to erect tombstones for the ones who had died in battle? Why have you buried them? Why have you placed the weapons they used under their tombstones? First Ancestor's aura suddenly calmed, and he lowered his head. I went back to this battlefield to bury them because I have guilt in my heart. I know I'm not worthy to be the human emperor, so I've come to redeem my sins. Qin Mu found it hard to believe. Do you really not have any hope in your heart? First Ancestor was expressionless. No, young man, Put down the dream in your heart. This human emperor farce should have ended long ago. Qin Mu lowered his head, but after a moment, he raised it with a smile, a radiant smile that a big boy like him always wore. You failed, they failed, but I have never failed before. Since you can't be the human emperor, I shall do it. First ancestor sneered at him, his expression full of scorn. In what way do you think you're capable of that? My surname is Qin, and my ancestor is founding emperor. I have the lineage of Carefree Village's Qin family, and I'm also the overlord body. Is there a problem? Qin Mu asked in a loud shout. First ancestor tilted his head, the scorn still there. You have too many titles and too much honor in your heart. So what if you have the lineage of founding emperor? He also lost and hasn't shown his face for 20,000 years. What can an overlord body do? I've heard about its legend, but I've never heard of any of its achievements. You're just a silly boy, just a kid. Let me shatter your illusion. He swept up his sleeves and suddenly attacked. Astonished, Qin Mu hurriedly blocked. However, he felt that the power in the strike wasn't great, so he couldn't help becoming stunned. First ancestor's power burst forth, and the ripple of the divine art threw the books on the shelves into the air. Don't destroy these books. Qin Mu shouted at him angrily and struck out with his fist. Behind him, a huge Buddha appeared, and 14 layers of heavenly gods and Buddhas surrounded him, transforming into 14 rays. Technique of Great Thunderclap Monastery. Small tricks. First ancestor broke it easily and punched Qin Mu in the chest while saying indifferently, "With just this, you can't protect yourself, let alone those books." Qin Mu was blown back, but his body transformed into a shadow, swooping into the ground. First ancestor tapped the floor with his feet and shook him out. With his vital chi as a sword, he stabbed toward Qin Mu's heart of brows. With just this low ability, your future will have nothing but death. First ancestor scorned. You are also a failure. Qin Mu flew into a rage and gathered his chi into a sword. When he pointed his finger, the vital chi swords clashed and hummed. The collisions rang endlessly, and books kept dropping out to be shredded by the sword chi. Qin Mu stared at their pieces with hatred burning in his eyes. Don't destroy their blood, sweat, and tears. Come and stop me then. First ancestor chuckled. If you can't defeat me, you're merely another pile of junk. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 522. I can. A few more books were destroyed, and Qin Mu's anger reached its breaking point. First ancestor human emperor didn't treat the efforts of the past human emperor as a thing. The efforts of village chief, human emperor Qikong, and the rest were being destroyed like they were nothing in his hands. Qin Mu's vital chi shook and suddenly exploded. The scarlet-red vital chi transformed into a sea of blood with countless corpses of gods and devils drifting within it. The second form of village chief's sword picture, sword of founding emperor sea of blood. His sword skill was different from that of village chief. He had incorporated 18 sword forms into this move instead of the 14. Besides the inferior mood and some flaws, the power of his sword skill had already far surpassed that of village chief. Just as he executed it, first ancestor's figure rose from the sea of blood. His sword skill split apart the sea of blood, paving a way for him. The corpses of gods and devils danced and became his helping hands as they pounced on Qin Mu. Bang, bang, bang. Streaks of blood ran down Qin Mu's body as he flew back. They came from the injuries inflicted by first ancestor's stabs. He crashed heavily against a wall of Hall of Human Emperors before sliding down and collapsing on the ground. The dragon Qilin was furious and roared loudly, then pounced at first ancestor human emperor. The man's 5 fingers moved. When they spread out, runes burst forth and formed a runic seal that was about 3 yards big and sealed the dragon Qilin's wide mouth. The Qilin true fire in the dragon Qilin's mouth was instantly blocked, and he got sent against a wall by a sweep of a sleeve. The chest rushed forward with its cover open, planning to swallow the man up. First ancestor human emperor tapped the chest with a foot and sent it straight at the dragon Qilin who had been sliding down the wall. The two of them tumbled out of Hall of Human Emperors and rolled down the steps. You should have seen it now. Your so-called overlord body, your so-called lineage of founding emperor, they are nothing more than empty names. First ancestor waved his hand and a bookshelf flew into the air. The books in it fell out, and with a sweep of his sleeves, the efforts of the past human emperors turned into paper butterflies. First ancestor had an indifferent expression. These books are just like you, nothing at all. No matter how hard you work, it's useless. So why struggle? Why continue to struggle? To fight for that laughable dream of yours? Qin Mu stood up, and his 10 fingers moved up and down, tapping on the wounds around his body to seal them up. He then rushed toward first ancestor once more. If you couldn't do something, it doesn't mean that I won't be able to. Seal. Forbid. Fix. River. Mountain. He rushed over frantically and executed human emperor Xianxia's spell with words. The word seal appeared beneath first ancestor human emperor's feet, and the word forbid brought him in. The word fix appeared in front of his face, and the word river was like a flood dragon coiling around him. Last came the word mountain, which pressed down on his head. Spell with words could have 5 words executed at once, and it was the wonderful technique that human emperor Xian had created. Yet those 5 words shattered one after another. First ancestor human emperor's palm seemed to be flipping the heaven and earth around when he slammed it down. Qin Mu roared angrily, his actions full of fierceness. His tendons were like huge dragons coiling around his bones, while his spine was like a soaring true dragon. True dragon overlord body. He had cultivated the technique from the true dragon's nest after merging it with overlord body 3 elixir technique. It had allowed his corporeal body to reach a height never seen before. It was his strongest corporeal body divine art. With his right hand turned over as Yang and his left hand as Yin, the heart of the palms moved to face first ancestor human emperor's palm strike. Yin Yang heaven flipping hands. It was the technique of third ancestor human emperor, but he had only taught Qin Mu the introductory style of Yin Yang heaven flipping hands. However, Qin Mu had comprehended the use of overlapping palms by himself. At that moment, he overlapped the pure Yin palm force with pure Yang palm force. With Yin and Yang exploding at the same time, the fusion of the 2 powers caused their strength to increase exponentially. Boom! Qin Mu stumbled backward. His left hand had been Yang and his right hand Yin, but when he overlapped them to face first ancestor's fist, its power had destroyed his Yin and Yang before he could even unleash his attack. He was blown away just like that. The 3rd generation human emperor was also a failure, so you are doomed to fail if you use his moves. First ancestor human emperor smacked then ground with the wind from his palm. Qin Mu, who had just landed, floated up uncontrollably from the vibration. Next, he was struck down by a madra and sprawled onto the ground once more. Clang. 2 rays of divine light shot out from his eyes and struck Qin Mu. The powerful gaze seemed ready to break his back, and the ground in the surroundings was scorched red hot. Qin Mu flipped up and sprinted away to avoid his gaze. He moved around the hall as though he was flying while divine light gathered in his eyes. 2 rays shot out from his eyes and collided with first ancestor's gaze. Bang! His divine eyes lost and he got pinned against a wall. You've met him? First ancestor human emperor pulled back his gaze and walked to the bookshelf of third ancestor. He took down a book, and it was none other than third ancestor's technique. You now know that the technique he spent his whole life to perfect is completely useless and should have been thrown into the toilet a long time ago. The book he wrote isn't even worthy to wipe asses. Qin Mu slid down from the wall with blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. He looked at first ancestor human emperor who was tearing up the books and suffered a setback. It was the first time he had met such a powerful opponent. First ancestor was using the same realm as him, so they were both fighting with 7 stars divine treasure. The only difference was that Qin Mu's 7 stars divine treasure had already merged with 6 directions divine treasure and had no barrier between them, while first ancestor's divine treasure still had a realm barrier. From this point alone, Qin Mu's vital qi surpassed first ancestor by a lot, but when they fought, it wasn't that way at all. First ancestor was a person who had no shortcomings. He didn't merge his divine treasures, but his corporeal body far surpassed that of Qin Mu. He was like a young true god. His fists, legs, muscles, skin, hair, bones, and tendons had all reached realms that far surpassed Qin Mu. His 5 viscera and 6 bowels were abnormally developed, and his heart, which was providing the body with blood circulation, was also strong. It was like a huge bell ringing as it sent qi and blood to all parts of his body in an instant and made his magic power move even quicker. His breath was also long-lasting. When he breathed, wind and clouds would sweep past, allowing his lungs to contain even more air. His kidney mobilized the strength of his corporeal body and allowed his body to stay in an incomparably stable state at all times as well. His 5 viscera and 6 directions corresponded directly with his 5 elements and 6 directions, merging perfectly with his divine treasures. His eyes were like the sun and the moon, combining perfectly with the 5 elements and 6 directions and transforming into 7 stars. His comprehension of the realm had reached a height that Qin Mu had never seen before too. His dantian was burning like a great furnace, similar to that of Mute. It was like a brilliantly shining sun that was the source of energy that moved his corporeal body and kept it at peak performance at all times. This type of corporeal body state was like that of Xing and flawless. In truth, it was even more powerful. His primordial spirit had also reached an inconceivable level. Primordial spirit was the spirit embryo, the spirit of the vital qi. Qin Mu was really proud of his primordial spirit since it was stronger than of everyone else, and his soul was much more stable as well. He could let his primordial spirit roam the void at 6 directions realm, unlike the others. He had even dual cultivated with primordial spirit and founded primordial spirit guide. After cultivating in 6 directions realm for a period of time, his primordial spirit had strengthened, and among his peers, he was matchless. Even Su Shenghua's primordial spirit was a line inferior to his. Yet, compared to that of first ancestor human emperor, his primordial spirit was much inferior. First ancestor human emperor's primordial spirit and corporeal body were perfectly matched as one. The movement of his heart led to attacks of the corporeal body, and the movement of his spirit became vital qi divine art. The movement of his will combined these 2 kinds of attacks into one. This resulted in first ancestor's attacks being incomparably fast, to the point that Qin Mu could not withstand them at all. They were always coming at him like the storm. No matter if it was first ancestor's corporeal body or divine arts, they were all perfectly united as one. He was the perfect divine arts practitioner. He was the youth form of a true god. Yet such a strong being had become a deserter when disaster and war broke out during the end years of founding emperor era. Even such a strong existence that looked to be unbeatable had become a deserter, afraid to die with his comrades, so how strong did the enemy have to be? Stop tearing! Qin Mu was gasping for his breath. First ancestor continued to tear the book apart, turning the efforts of third ancestors into scattered pieces. He then said indifferently, "What's the point of leaving them? The people that had written these books are useless, so the books are also useless. They are just taking up space, so isn't it better to tear them up? And you're no different. You will become a useless person like them in the future, for even if you cultivated to my level, you would still be useless." His expression grew scornful, and he walked to second ancestor's bookshelf and took out a book to rip it apart. He sneered. They treated high heavens as their rival. High heavens? High heavens are merely dogs. But they couldn't even defeat dogs, so what talk can there be about a counterattack? You're also a useless person. You can't even defeat me, so what bullsh *t ambition? What bullsh *t dream? Quickly go home, find a woman, and give birth to a baby. Qin Mu pounced over while shouting angrily. The spirit embryo in the heart of his brows merged with his soul to form his primordial spirit. He combined his corporeal body and primordial spirit as one since he'd noticed the reason why first ancestor was so powerful and immediately used it for himself. I told you not to tear anymore. His speed increased drastically, and his palm force became boundless and terrifying. However, the next moment he was sent away by first ancestor once more. Great overarching heavenly stars palm force. Qin Mu pounced over again. Boom! He was blown back again. Bang! Bang bang! Dull thuds of heavy strikes came from Hall of Human Emperors for a while. They stopped only after quite some time had passed. First ancestor human emperor looked at Qin Mu, who was crawling up with difficulty, and shook his head. You still haven't given up? You're different from the previous human emperors. They were lied to by their masters and had no choice but to become human emperors. If they had received my permission to not become human emperors, they would have definitely been overjoyed and given up their positions in delight. What about you? You were lied to as well, weren't you? Qin Mu stood up shakily and sealed the wounds on his body. He wiped away the blood on the corner of his lips while panting heavily. Village chief didn't lie to me. He told me before that there are no benefits in becoming the human emperor, and I might even be chased, becoming the target of everyone, which would put me in constant danger. Then why do you still stand? First ancestor was puzzled. Why don't you give up? Why do you want to do something that doesn't benefit you? Are you dumb? Qin Mu grinned. His teeth were already dyed red by blood. If no one does it, wouldn't there be no more hope forever? If you don't want to do it, why don't you let me do it? Because you are dumb. First ancestor human emperor attacked him, each of his blows heavier than the one before. He shouted angrily, "You are a dumbass that doesn't know how to give up. You will only give your life away. There will be countless enemies like me in the future, and if you can't even fight against me, how are you going to fight them? My mistake shouldn't be borne by the later generations. Give up now." Boom! Qin Mu took the blow head-on and stumbled backward. First ancestor's attacks came to patter him like the storm. Each strike was as heavy as a mountain and as sharp as a blade. Give up! Give up! You better give up now! Qin Mu tumbled out of Hall of Human Emperors. When he was about to crawl up, First ancestor had already come to his side. He crossed a Madra as heaven and a Madra as earth and threw him away again. When Qin Mu crashed between two burial mounds, First ancestor suddenly appeared to step on his chest. Have you given up? Qin Mu grabbed his ankle and pulled him away. He stood up once again and rushed at him while shouting, "The title of human emperor isn't what you gave yourself, but something given to you by all of the races. You can't take it back. Human emperor is fake. Let me break the illusion in your heart." With a cold gaze, First ancestor stretched out his hands to grab Qin Mu's neck and raised him into the air. Qin Mu grabbed hold of his hands by force and encircled them like a huge python before flipping him over. Bang! He was blown into midair by First ancestor and fell back down once again. First ancestor stood up and came to the straw hut. He sneered and said, "It is these useless people who created the illusion that the human emperor should sacrifice and struggle for the people that a hot-blooded youth like you was pushed into acting rashly. Let me destroy their corpses. Turn the skeletons of these people angling for fame to dust." He barged into the closest straw hut and crushed the tombstone of second ancestor into powder. He then grabbed second ancestor's skeleton. "You dare!" A gale whooshed in as Qin Mu roared angrily. First ancestor turned and raised his palm to face the punch that was coming for him. It was a bloodied fist, a fist that brought along boundless anger and whose fingers were trembling. Boom! Countless bolts of lightning struck First ancestor's face, blowing him away. The straw hut exploded, and a bloodied man caught second ancestor's skeleton and placed it properly before giving his respects. He then shot out like an arrow released from a bow after first ancestor who was in midair. "If you can't, then let me do it. I can." A dull crashing sound came from afar as a gray cloud rose into the sky. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 523, Forgiveness. Qin Mu landed on the ground with mud raising all around him. He was covered in blood, and droplets of it mixed with the mud. His hair fluttered up from fury as he walked toward First Ancestor Human Emperor, who had just gotten up to his feet. "You are the deserter of this battlefield. You don't have the right to look down on anyone." Qin Mu roared and rushed at First Ancestor Human Emperor. Even though his injuries were heavy, his aura was even fiercer than before, and the power of his moves was even more astonishing. Anger filled his chest. When First Ancestor was about to destroy Second Ancestor's skeleton, he felt as if all the blood in his chest was going to come bursting out. His primordial spirit merged with his corporeal body from where it stood on the spirit platform in his divine treasures. As his primordial spirit held up the sky with his head while his feet stepped on the earth, he was flooded with the mist of 6 directions that surged in from all directions. Qin Mu's vital qi fused with his primordial spirit, which had fused with his corporeal body, and the vital qi reached all parts of his body. Suddenly, he comprehended the most important point about first ancestor's primordial spirit merging with his corporeal body. Circulation of techniques needed time, and so did any divine art to burst forth with energy. The only difference was between a long and short time, a strong and weak power. With primordial spirit located in the divine treasures, vital qi would enter the body directly from them, saving the time required for vital qi circulation. First ancestor human emperor was extremely fast was not only because every part of his corporeal body was on the god realm, but due to the usage of primordial spirit fusion with the corporeal body. At this moment, the 5 stars in Qin Mu's 5 elements divine treasure corresponded with his 5 viscera: heart, liver, spleen, lung, and kidney, which were fire, wood, earth, metal, and water respectively. 5 stars entered 5 viscera, the 5-star sovereigns moving into his heart, liver, spleen, lung, and kidney. Each of his 5 viscera now had a god staying inside it. The heart was where the bull-headed Mars sovereign moved. The liver was where the Jupiter sovereign with a bird's body and human head took his position. The spleen was where the Saturn sovereign with the body of the snake and the head of a human slithered. The lungs were where the tiger-headed Venus sovereign took his seat. The kidney was where the red-haired Mercury sovereign with the snake body resided. 5 elements and the corporeal body complemented each other, and his strength increased little by little, which gave him the strength to send first ancestor who was planning to destroy second ancestor's skeleton flying in one blow. Yes, they have lost. They have lost miserably. The 2 palms collided, and a terrifying force burst forth. The white fog in the surroundings gave off a slicing sound when the 2 palms clashed to create an air current. The palm force was like an incomparably sharp knife that sliced the fog in half a 300-year distance. They did it, but you've done nothing, so what right do you have to criticize them? Qin Mu roared angrily, and all of his vital qi burst forth. His tendons moved fiercely under his skin and pushed back against first ancestor. Bang, 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 bang. Under their feet, the ground exploded continuously until there were 300 yards of clean space around them, without any fog. It was, after all, the compressed force from Qin Mu's violent palm strike. All the fog had thus gathered behind it, which meant it was now behind first ancestor. Other than establishing Hall of Human Emperors, what else have you done? Qin Mu asked, and volcanoes erupted behind him, flames rushing into the sky. They were from human Emperor Qikang's fist skill, which gathered heartfire as power for an explosion. First ancestor human emperor's expression changed slightly. The force in Qin Mu's palm suddenly increased exponentially and sent him flying away. You've done nothing. First ancestor human emperor was in the midair when he saw Qin Mu raise one leg. His body spun around while his vital qi transformed into all kinds of spirit weapons to bombard his target. It was human Emperor Lan Po's spell for refining spirit weapons. First ancestor human emperor's sleeves swept up and shattered all the spirit weapons. But before he even landed on the ground, he saw Qin Mu raise a finger in his direction. Mountains then burst forth and drowned him out. Connecting walls tapping blue mountains. If they're inferior to you, teach them. You can teach them. First ancestor human emperor broke the move by force, but he could still not land for a huge bell rushed at him. Qin Mu came to his face and attacked the bell, all his punches and kicks landing on its walls. The bell shook, and its power grew fiercer and fiercer. It was sometimes tilted, sometimes facing down, sometimes up, and sometimes its mouth was aimed at first ancestor. Fifth ancestor's 5 thunder heaven-raising bell. First ancestor human emperor fell back repeatedly while Qin Mu speaking to him angrily through the ringing of the bell. How did second ancestor die? From old age. Boom. First ancestor human emperor's footsteps were messed up. How did third ancestor die? From old age. How did fourth ancestor die? From old age. Were the aptitudes or the comprehension of all the human emperors inferior to yours? If you couldn't do it, you should have imparted your technique to become a god and let them do it. Why did you let them die of old age? Qin Mu executed the divine arts of all 34 human emperors that he had learned in Fengdu. The 34 human emperors had tested his aptitude and comprehension with them, but they hadn't imparted the full techniques, hoping that he would go to Hall of Human Emperors to receive their complete teaching. They taught Qin Mu roughly and didn't expect him to learn much. Yet their divine arts burst forth with astonishing power in his hands, making first ancestor retreat step by step. You clearly have the technique to become a god, so you should have taught them. Why didn't you teach them? What have they received from you? Other than a broken seal, other than a bunch of responsibilities and burdens, they didn't receive anything. They couldn't learn your techniques and divine arts yet. They were still helping you carry the burden you couldn't lift by yourself, struggle and fight with the enemies you feared. Yet you destroy their hard work and even want to destroy their corpses. They were all ashamed to face you after they died, ashamed to not have succeeded. Yet you want to destroy everything they left behind. How do you have the face to call them useless, to call them incapable? Qin Mu unleashed his final move, but first ancestor suddenly stretched his hand to grab his fist and swung him up before smashing him ruthlessly against the ground. Qin Mu jumped up and first ancestor counterattacked with fist skills, body movements, sword skills, and formation skills, each one of which was extremely marvelous. He easily broke all of Qin Mu's attacks and sent him into a defensive position. He was still incomparably strong, and the retreat moments ago seemed to have been just a trick for Qin Mu to weaken. Now he was going to destroy him completely, crushing his confidence and body together. His battle experience was incomparably abundant, and his corporeal body stayed in the most perfect state. His control of vital qi had reached an unbelievable realm. Qin Mu let loose his feelings and indulged himself in unleashing them in his divine arts, while first ancestor could control his feelings perfectly and didn't waste any excess energy to vent his emotions. Bang, bang, bang. Qin Mu received countless punches, kicks, and divine arts. Compared to the young true god's corporeal body that first ancestor had, he was still too tender. His true dragon overlord body couldn't be maintained anymore, and a finger from first ancestor human emperor that touched the heart of his brows broke it. Qin Mu was thrown high up before falling down like a tattered sack filled of grain in front of second ancestor's dilapidated straw hut. He tried to struggle to get up, but he couldn't rise no matter what. First ancestor human emperor walked over with a cold expression. He came to his side and said emotionlessly, "You talked so much, but was it useful? If you can defeat me, otherwise you can never carry the title of the human emperor. Once you take it, the enemies you'll have to face will be much stronger and much more ruthless than me." Qin Mu stared with eyes wide open as he walked to second ancestor's straw hut and lifted the man's skeleton. "Don't." Qin Mu crawled forward with difficulty till he could grab first ancestor's ankle. With a sob, he pleaded, "I beg you." Kacha. The skeleton of second ancestor shattered and fell to the ground. First ancestor lifted his feet and gave 2 stomps while saying coldly, "If you can't beat me, you will never beat them. This is the first time you had the chance to face me, so you still have 34 chances." Qin Mu's vision became blurry as his cheeks went ice cold. First ancestor human emperor lifted him up and threw him onto the chest. He said coldly, "Every time you lose to me, I will destroy the skeleton of a human emperor. If you continue to lose, the skeletons of these failures will cease to exist. Go!" The dragon Qilin opened his mouth to roar at him, but his mouth was still sealed. He couldn't make a sound. First ancestor human emperor looked at him, and the dragon Qilin lowered his head. He brought the chest with Qin Mu back to where they had come from. "I'll kill you." Qin Mu's voice came from atop the chest. "I'll definitely kill you." First ancestor human emperor trembled, but he didn't turn back. The dragon Qilin then brought the chest with Qin Mu out of the ancient fragment of the celestial heavens. "I'm sorry." Bathump. First ancestor human emperor knelt down in front of second ancestor's straw hut with a cloud of dust. I'm sorry. I didn't really mean to destroy your remains. I'm sorry. I've already forgiven you." A ghost rose from the remains. It had a discernible second ancestor's figure that was smiling. I've long forgiven you. I know your thoughts. You want to make him grow up faster because he is the overlord body, right? He can carry the burden we didn't manage to, right? I've forgiven you, so return to Fengdu. They will also forgive you. In the dilapidated straw hut, skeletons raised their heads and looked silently at the kneeling first ancestor human emperor. We have all forgiven you. They looked at their ancestor. First ancestor human emperor had not imparted the technique to become God to them, but he had imparted a spirit that couldn't be described with words, a kind of spirit that was undying and unwilling to give up. I can't forgive myself. First ancestor human emperor knelt on the ground, and his body slowly changed into a stone statue as his primordial spirit left for far away. The chest clattered as it ran, carrying Qin Mu over many mountains. In front of it, the dragon Qilin looked ahead in alert, in case any strange beast in the wild tried to attack them. 2 days later, they came to border Dragon City. Xianxia and Hu Linger hurriedly took over Qin Mu's care. After a few days, he recovered and nursed himself back to full health. I'll kill him. Qin Mu's eyes were lifeless as he sat on the head of a dragon pillar in the city. I will definitely kill him. I will never forgive him, he told Ling Yuxiu, who had brought him up there. She looked at his dispirited self of the last couple days. She didn't know how to console him, so she thought to bring him to this place where they had played together back then in a hope to alleviate some of the dark clouds in his heart. Father is summoning me back. He says he's sending me to West Earth. Ling Yuxiu hesitated for a moment before saying, even though West Earth has submitted to us, there's no power of the imperial court within it. Do you want to take a stroll with me in West Earth? Don't keep thinking about it by yourself. It's quite scary. Tell me about it. Maybe I'll have an idea. Qin Mu looked at her with a stupefied expression, his eyes lacking any life. The stubborn beard hairs that he liked to pluck had already become a stubble after not being touched for a few days. He asked lifelessly, how do I beat a true god? Ling Yuxiu was stunned. Qin Mu laid down. Go to West Earth. The Emperor told you to go to West Earth and crown Prince Yushu to the north, which was recently conquered. So if you rule West Earth better than he, you will gain the title of the Crown Princess. If you want it, I can help you. I have people in West Earth, but I can't go with you. I have to think about some things. Ling Yuxiu laid down beside him and placed her hands behind her head while looking blankly at the sky. A few years ago, when we were lying here together, everything was so carefree. I liked you, you also liked me, so why after we grew up, there are suddenly so many worries? How I missed those times. It's probably because we grew up, Qin Mu said in a low voice after closing his eyes. Ling Yuxiu flipped over and looked at him from the side. She plucked a long hair from his beard and asked, are you still the original you? Qin Mu was stunned. Xingyan said that a person's body changes completely every 7 years. Some 3-4 years have already passed, so I should only be left with half of me. Ling Yuxiu shuddered and plucked out a few more strands from his beard ruthlessly while saying angrily, you're scaring me again. You will never become Xingyan. She tilted her head and pondered over it. If you don't want me to go to West Earth, I can stay with you. Do you want to go? Qin Mu asked. I want. Ling Yuxiu stood up and looked down at the mountains and rivers of great ruins from high above while speaking with high spirits. I want to become a female emperor and defeat my father. I want to make him know that I'm better and more powerful than all of his sons. A flicker of light flashed in Qin Mu's lifeless eyes. He felt inspiration surge through him after witnessing her motivated speech, and vigor returned to his body. It was as if he had come back to life. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 524, Seeking the Path in Little Jade Capital. Ling Yuxiu sent Qin Mu to Heavenly Saint Academy before returning to the capital in 2 days, where she needed to wait for the Emperor's arrangement. When the Emperor wanted to open 4 new big academies to be the highest educational establishments second only to Imperial College, the Hall Masters, Elders, and Heavenly Kings of Heavenly Saint cult fought hard in the Imperial Court. Their labor gave fruit, and Heavenly Saint Academy was given permission to be set up. It used Granny C's manor, and after the battle with Xing and Granny C, Mute, Blind, and Apothecary had stayed there. There were numerous members of Heavenly Saint cult in the imperial court. The highest ones were Imperial Preceptor and Duke Wei, while the lowest were soldiers and bailiffs everywhere. So Qin Mu didn't need to fight for the academy as others did it in his name. Granny C, mute and blind, had become directorates of Heavenly Saint Academy, teaching lessons once in a while. The other directorates were mostly the hall masters of Heavenly Saint cult. When Qin Mu came there, he was just in time for class, but he couldn't see anyone in the academy. There was only a bunch of flood dragons frolicking in the lake. When they saw Qin Mu, they were first stunned, then jumped up onto the shore in a frenzy. Qin Mu instantly knew that the situation was bad and turned to run. Weren't these flood dragons brought by Saintess Xiang to be reared in Saint Arrival Mountain? Why have they come to Heavenly Saint Academy? Maha! 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 A bunch of flood dragons passed by the dragon Qilin and the chest. After a moment, Qin Mu was captured by the flood dragons. Afterward, he could only drag his exhausted body forward with over a dozen flood dragons rubbing their heads against him, their horns opening bloody wounds on his neck. Maha! The little flood dragons clung onto him with narrowed eyes as though they were sleepy. Qin Mu's body was all drenched as though he had been just fished out from the water. The dragon Qilin let out a long sigh of relief, and the flood dragons turned to look at him in unison. The dragon Qilin realized he was in trouble and turned to run in a hurry. Maha! 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 A bunch of flood dragons ran past the chest, and after a moment, Qin Mu saw the dragon Qilin barely able to crawl forward. His neck, body, and forelimbs were covered with flood dragons. Maha! The flood dragons rubbed against the dragon Qilin until this big fatty was bloody. Maha! The bunch of flood dragons raised their heads to look at the chest in curiosity. The chest had taken a step to follow behind Qin Mu, but at that moment, it realized that it was also in trouble and started running. The flood dragons slipped down from the dragon Qilin and rushed toward the chest while crying out in delight, Maha! 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 The dragon Qilin let out a sigh of relief and collapsed on the ground. After a moment, the chest ran back, making Qin Mu and the dragon Qilin stare at it with their eyes wide open. There were no flood dragons on the chest at all. Maha! The chest opened up and over a dozen dragon heads popped out. They cried out in unison, very happy. This sight was akin to a chest with daffodils of all colors showing their heads. The chest was rather pleased with and followed after them, as if the flood dragons weren't heavy at all. Moor is back? When the bell rang for the end of class, Granny C walked out of a big hall. She saw Qin Mu and hurriedly came over to welcome him with a smile. Haven't seen you in a long while. You're truly a Grand Chancellor who asks others to work but does nothing himself. You threw all these scholars here and slipped away while making us help you look after them. Qin Mu hugged her tightly, and his tears flowed out uncontrollably. Granny! Stunned, Granny C smiled at him gently. You've suffered? How can a great cult master cry so miserably? You're still the Grand Chancellor of Heavenly Saint Academy, so stop crying. It's not good for the scholars to see you like this. Tell Granny what happened, and Granny will take justice for you. Qin Mu felt himself calming down and let go of her. He shook his head and said, What happened with these flood dragons? Weren't they sent to Saint Arrival Mountain? Lassie Xiang wanted to send them to Saint Arrival Mountain, but she disliked the fact that they ate spirit pills, and not even of one type. They were too costly, so she sent them back, Granny C explained. Lassie Xiang is really stingy, and she keeps a close watch on the purse of Heavenly Saint cult. However, it's good to put them in the academy. When scholars learn how to refine pills from your grandpa apothecary, the pills they refine are just fine to feed these flood dragons. Actually, these little ones are quite famous in the academy. When scholars want to paint dragons, refine dragon-shaped spirit weapons, or to cultivate dragon-based divine arts, they all need them. But what happened to you? Who provoked you? Cripple. Apothecary. Blind. Come over. Moor has been bullied by others. Bang. There was a loud boom, and Cripple suddenly appeared beside Qin Mu. He asked bewilderment. Who bullied our Moor? Is he tired of living? Its first ancestor human emperor, a true god. Grandpa Cripple. Qin Mu said. Cripple shuddered and turned to leave. Blind grabbed hold of him and asked with a smile, "Cripple, you're scared?" "Like hell I'm not scared," Cripple muttered. "It's just that Xing and that scoundrel isn't even a true god yet. He beat us all up quite miserably. First ancestor human emperor is a real true god. So won't we just be seeking death by provoking him?" Apothecary walked over and pondered over it. First ancestor human emperor? True god? Can it be settled with poison? Qin Mu shook his head. "I want to defeat him fair and square, by fighting him on the same realm. I want to get rid of him by myself." Apothecary shuddered before shrugging his shoulders. "My abilities are useless in this." Cripple sighed. "I also don't have anything to offer. Where's Mute?" "He ran out a few days ago." Butcher held onto the shirt on his shoulder as he walked over while speaking in a booming voice. "That fellow always slip away from time to time, going God knows where. Moore, how are the abilities of a true god?" "He's stronger than me in all fields. He runs faster than me. His strength is greater than mine. His spirit and body are one. His divine eyes surpass my divine eyes. The power of his fists is astonishing, and his paths, skills, and divine arts have merged into one with his corporeal body." Qin Mu's face dimmed. "He has already entered the path in every field, so the only thing in which I'm stronger is magic power." Blind frowned and asked, "He's stronger than my divine eyes?" Qin Mu nodded gently. Butcher, who wasn't afraid of the heaven and earth, also locked his eyebrows in a frown. After a moment, he asked, "My knife skills were easily broken by him." Def walked over. "What about the painting path? No chance to execute. What about Heavenly Saint Cult's divine arts?" Granny C asked. Qin Mu shook his head. Everyone frowned together. "Have you tried running?" Cripple asked with some nervousness. "He caught up with me." "Poison? Forget it. Forget it." Apothecary waved his hands and said, "I've confidence in poisoning a god, but to poison a true god with no weakness at all, I don't think I could do that." Qin Mu smiled at them. "You guys don't need to worry about my matter. I've thought over it quietly for the last couple days, and I've realized something. Even though he looks invincible, he escaped from the battlefield back then, which means that there are people who are stronger than him. He isn't invincible, so I can definitely find a way to surpass him." Granny C smiled and said, "It's rare for you to come back, so stay at Heavenly Saint Academy for some time. Let us help you think of a solution." Qin Mu nodded and went to put down his luggage. Granny C, Butcher, Blind, and the rest gathered together and looked at his back. Butcher frowned and said, "This is the first time Qin Mu has lost his confidence. He was not like this in the past, always so full of trust in himself. But now..." He shook his head. Blind narrowed his eyes. "True gods, are they really so terrifying? Surpassing my divine eyes? I don't really believe. We should train him while he's here." Def suddenly said, "To learn without thinking is blindness. To think without learning is idleness." He is currently at the stage of learning and thinking. Moore's fight with first ancestor human emperor is not just a battle of cultivation, but also a battle of Tao heart. If he walks out of it, it'll probably be a huge improvement in the cultivation of his Tao heart. If he can't do it, I'm afraid the overlord body will become a useless body. Let's train him well, so he doesn't become useless." Everyone nodded. After Qin Mu settled down, it was as if he had returned to disabled elderly village. Butcher, Blind, Deaf, Cripple, and Granny C would call him over from time to time and feed him moves, flipping the heaven and earth in the academy with the fights. Most of the scholars in the academy were from Heavenly Saint Cult, while others had come from the other academies in the world to seek knowledge here. The next few days were an eye-opener for them as they witnessed the legendary abilities of all the directorates. After a few days, Granny C and the rest all frowned. Qin Mu was still fearful and nervous, not daring to attack, which resulted in him being frequently beaten up by them. The worst part was that even though those few times when he attacked his moves were incomparably exquisite, he would execute them halfway and stop. Butcher was furious and beat him up while scolding sternly, "Why did you not finish your move?" Qin Mu didn't retaliate and just shook his head. "It's all wrong. You have to finish it even if it's wrong." Granny C hurriedly pulled Butcher away and said angrily, "He isn't in the right state, so stop beating him. What if you make him dumb like that?" Deaf nodded and said, "There is too much stuff accumulated in his brain and he thinks too much. He has burrowed himself into a dead end and can't get out, so you won't gain anything by beating him up like this. Once he finds his way out, he will become a great master." Butcher stared at them. What if he doesn't find his way out? Everyone was silent. "Moor, you won't learn anything in the academy, so it's better for you to take a stroll and drive away your cares," Granny C said. Qin Mu nodded and packed his luggage, leaving the academy with a muddled head. Cripple followed him for a period of time, but only saw Qin Mu walking randomly. When he saw that he wasn't in any danger, he calmed down and returned to the academy. One day, Qin Mu came to Surging River and sat down on its shore. Almost instantly, he heard a voice from behind him. "Qin brat." Qin Mu turned around and saw a luxuriously dressed youth standing behind him with a look of terror, ready to escape any time. "Oh, it's Grandmaster." Qin Mu turned back and continued to look at the river. Pan Gong Tso propped himself up since his one leg was a deer leg. He had planned to escape the moment the youth attacked him, but when he saw him continuing to sit beside the shore without any intention to attack him, his guts grew. He got closer and asked, "Cult Master Qin seems to have some troubles? You and I are old friends, so why don't you tell me about what's eating at you? Maybe I can help you solve your problem." Qin Mu was bored to death and threw a stone into the river. "I'm thinking about how I can defeat a true god on the same realm, but I can't find the answer. Grandmaster, can you teach me?" Pan Gong Tso's eyes lit up, and he got closer and closer. He said with a smile, "I see. You must be very troubled now, right? You feel you're very useless, right? That life is uninteresting? In that case, what's the point of living? Let me help you finish things. Hee. Whoosh. The river churned, and Dragon-Rearing Sovereign's huge head rose up high like a mountain. His whiskers hung in the air beside Pan Gong Tso. The youth's body turned stiff, and his face turned yellow. He immediately turned to leave. "Sorry for disturbing, farewell." Once he said that, he vanished without a trace. Dragon-Rearing Sovereign watching him leave and shook his head. "This brat is even more slippery than a loach. Your Majesty, I can't solve your problems. Even though I'm a god, I don't have the power to get rid of a true god." Qin Mu sighed while on the mountain behind him she swished his tail in annoyance. "I also don't have the ability. Your Majesty, can I change the mountain? This one is too small, and my temple is only this high. It can't even fit my hoof." Qin Mu got up and rode the dragon Qilin away. "Human Emperor Qin, you've come to my little jade capital to proceed with 5 Qi breakthrough and 6 directions breakthrough?" Hermit Qing Yu hurriedly came to welcome him with a smile. "It's been a while since my little jade capital had any visitors. Hall of 5 Qi and Hall of 6 Directions have been waiting for the arrival of Human Emperor." "That's right, there's still a thing I haven't told you about. A few months ago, the stone statue of your first ancestor Human Emperor seemed to have come back to life. He left Little Jade Capital, but I've no idea where he went." The corners of Qin Mu's eyes twitched, and he said, "I met him." Astonishment showed up on Hermit Qing Yu's face. "You met him? In that case, do you also know that the stone statue of Saint Woodcutter has also come back to life and left Little Jade Capital?" Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 525, The Other World in the Darkness. Saint Woodcutter's stone statue has revived? Qin Mu's heart trembled violently, and he hurriedly asked, "Where is he?" "He left as well. If you were a few days earlier, you could have met him. Saint Woodcutter had left then with his axe. When he awakened, I jumped in shock, wondering why such 2 existences had woken up one after another," Hermit Qing Yu said. "As for where he went, I do not know." Qin Mu composed himself. First ancestor Human Emperor of Hall of Human Emperors and Saint Woodcutter of Heavenly Saint Cult waking up one after another was indeed strange. Why did it happen? Where could Saint Woodcutter go? Heavenly Saint Cult wasn't founded by him, but by Founding Master. Saint Woodcutter had only wanted to leave behind his legacy, so it was doubtful he'd go to Heavenly Saint Cult. But besides it, where else could he go? Wang Muran and the rest were not in Little Jade Capital since they had gone to Border Dragon City, so there were only some old immortals left on the mountain. Hermit Qin Yu examined Qin Mu and said, "Human Emperor Qin's state doesn't seem right. Do you really want to enter Hall of 5 Qi? You look out of sorts now." Qin Mu shook his head and said, "May I ask Hermit Qin Yu to open Hall of 5 Qi, Hall of 6 Directions and Hall of 7 Stars? I want to go in and take a look." Hermit Qin Yu hesitated for a moment. He wasn't too at ease with the youth's current state. "If Human Emperor is insistent on entering, my Little Jade Capital will naturally do its best to satisfy you. However, your state doesn't seem right now, and barging in by force will not be good for you. You only have one chance after all. Passing 5 Qi breakthrough, 6 Directions breakthrough, and 7 Stars breakthrough would definitely increase your foundation drastically. So don't waste this chance and come only when in your best state." Qin Mu smiled at him. "I just want to go in and take a look, not to challenge." Hermit Qin Yu was helpless. "Please follow me." He led Qin Mu to Hall of 3 Eons while saying, "You pass through 3 Eons breakthrough, so after you enter the hall, you will automatically enter Hall of 5 Qi. If you pass through it, you will enter Hall of 6 Directions. After it will be Hall of 7 Stars. You aren't in the right state, so to prevent you from making any mistakes, I will host this personally." Qin Mu gave his thanks and walked into Hall of 3 Eons. Before he could even steady himself, the scenery in front of his eyes changed, and 5 huge stars rose in the sky, shining in gold, green, blue, red, and yellow colors. Each one of them had a palace on it. Qin Mu focused himself, and besides the 5 stars, he could also see the sun and moon in the sky. However, they were extremely far from him, as though there was a world separating them. The 5 stars in the sky were huge beyond belief, but they were at different distances, some far and some close. In the 5 sacred halls, gods who corresponded to the 5-star sovereigns stood up. Suddenly, Hermit Qin Yu's voice came from afar. "Senior Sister Ing He, let me replace you for this stage." A red-haired god with a snake's body stood up and transformed into a flowing light that left into the distance. Another ray of bright light flew over and landed in that sacred hall. Hermit Qin Yu changed into a red-haired god with a snake's body and said, "Human Emperor Qin, Hall of 5 Qi is separated into metal, wood, water, fire, and earth breakthroughs. Which element will you choose?" Qin Mu shook his head. "My trip here was to take a look at the divine treasures of a true god. So may Hermit Qin Yu make things easy for me." Hermit Qin Yu frowned, and so did the other 4 immortals. One of them said, "The founder of my Little Jade Capital left behind Hall of 3 Eons to teach the later generations and fill in what they lack. It isn't for us to observe his divine treasures." An elderly woman frowned. The people who've come in to challenge here had never made such a weird request before. "Senior Brother Qin Yu, Human Emperor Qin is not an outsider." Hermit Qin Yu pondered over it before saying, "He shared the method to become God with the world, and we have all received his grace. Little Jade Capital should satisfy his request. Besides, the ancestor who left the test also was surnamed Qin." The other 4 old immortals spoke no more. "Human Emperor Qin, you only have one chance to challenge us, and if you succeed, you would receive the divine vitality of the 5 Qi. This could supplement the deficiency of your 5 elements divine treasures cultivation. Are you sure you just want to take a look at the divine treasures of this god?" Qin Mu bowed. "Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, but teach a man to fish and you will feed him for a lifetime. I'm willing to give up the divine vitality of the 5 Qi." Hermit Qin Yu broke into a smile. "All right, I thought Human Emperor Qin's frame of mind was unstable and worried that you had lost your wisdom and would lose the challenge, but your boldness makes me admire you. In that case, come up." His green light fell to the ground, and Qin Mu was raised up by it, landing on the water element star. The red-haired god with a snake body that Hermit Qin Yu had transformed into led him into his sacred hall. "Human Emperor Qin, feel free to look. It will depend on your abilities how much you will be able to comprehend." Qin Mu gave his thanks and examined everything in detail. He observed the rune markings on the 4 walls of the sacred hall, paying close attention to them. There were sacred halls on all 5 stars in 5 elements divine treasure, and they were all naturally formed. Every divine arts practitioner that cultivated to this realm would refine 5 stars in their 5 elements divine treasure. The 5 stars would correspond to 5 elements. The stars were naturally formed, and the palace halls on the stars were also naturally formed. However, different techniques would form different rune markings. They would then combine with the vital qi and become the gods in the palace halls. In the 5 elements divine treasure of any divine arts practitioner, when the gods of the 5 elements breathed out their vital qi, its attributes changed. That was why such a name as 5 qi was created. Qin Mu's 5 elements divine treasure has already been cultivated to the extremes, so it was difficult for him to take any more steps further. However, the fight between him and First Ancestor had made him realize that his limit wasn't everyone's limit. He observed in detail, and Hermit Qin Mu was very patient. He kept waiting for him. It was hard to say how long had passed when Qin Mu closed his eyes, having studied enough. When he opened them, he looked toward Hermit Qin Mu. "I have an unreasonable request." Hermit Qin Mu understood and changed into a ray of bright light that left. Only Qin Mu was then alone in the sacred hall. The rune markings on the walls instantly lit up, and his body changed against his will, turning him into a red-haired god with a snake's body. After a long time, Qin Mu dispersed the god form and left the sacred hall. He went to another star and entered another palace hall, observing the rune markings there. After a dozen days, he finally walked finished with all 5 stars and went to 6 directions divine treasure. He spent a dozen days more there before entering 7 stars divine treasure. Many more days passed. After that, he couldn't proceed anymore since celestial being divine treasure and life and death divine treasure had no one to host them. When Qin Mu walked out of Hall of 3 Eons looking a little haggard and with a stubby beard, Hermit Qin Mu knew that the youth had not been sleeping the whole time. He felt slightly pained for him and asked, "Has human Emperor Qin found what he wanted?" Qin Mu was in good spirits. The improvement in his 5 elements, 6 directions, and 7 stars divine treasures had given him a lot, renewing his confidence. He gave his thanks. "Much thanks, immortal. As for whether I found what I wanted, I still need to confirm it. May I ask, comparing the founder of Little Jade Capital to First Ancestor Human Emperor of Hall of Human Emperors, whose abilities were better?" "I can't really say whose abilities were stronger, since both of them are seniors who had become true gods 20,000 years ago, and I've never seen them fight before. However, Little Jade Capital has a few old scrolls that speak about the ancestor once going to find the first-generation human emperor. He had wanted to make him leave a mountain, but he returned in low spirits from a defeat and had to nurse his injuries for several months. The scroll stated that the first-generation human emperor had used immense magic power to move the fragment of founding Emperor Celestial Heavens, and that his abilities were extremely strong. Hall of Human Emperors is 100 times bigger than Little Jade Capital and is known to be terrifying. I think that the ancestors of Little Jade Capital had all went out of their way to protect themselves, while the first-generation human emperor had brought countless people from various races to battlefields all the time. From that, it's not that hard to make a guess whose abilities were stronger." Qin Mu's face turned ashen. After a long time, he bowed. "I understand. Much thanks, immortal." Hermit Qin Mu frowned and felt that the youth's state of mind was even worse than when he had come. "You haven't been sleeping for a month and more, so you should take a rest first." Qin Mu agreed. Hermit Qin Mu arranged a room for him and let him sleep. Qin Mu woke up after a dozen more days, but his complexion still wasn't good. He insisted on leaving, and Hermit Qin Mu didn't keep him back any longer. "If Saint Woodcutter comes back, where do I go to inform you?" "I'll have to trouble Immortal to go to Border Dragon City. I might be there." Hermit Qin Mu saw him off while thinking in bewilderment. Back when human Emperor Qin came here for the first time, he was so full of metal, so why has he become so dispirited? Qin Mu sat on the chest that brought him away. He poured a full basin of Scarlet Fire Spirit pills mixed with Fire Element Divine Vitality pill to the delighted and surprised yet nervous Dragon Qilin. "Why has Cult Master become so kind today? Is it because I starved for over a month, or is he preparing to put me on the table? No matter what, I need to eat first. After he finished the basin, Qin Mu poured him another one. The dragon Qilin hesitated for a moment while looking down at the basin full of spirit pills. He suddenly began to cry miserably as he lowered his head to eat more. Qin Mu looked at him in bewilderment. What are you crying for? It's good to die as a full ghost, the dragon Qilin said through a full mouth while wiping his eyes. At least I can head on my way with a full stomach. Cult Master, make it a swift one. Qin Mu shook his head and said, I've starved you these few days, so I'm paying you back. I ain't going to kill you for your meat. The dragon Qilin was delighted and ate all the spirit pills in the basin. When they passed by a city, Qin Mu stopped to buy some medicinal ingredients. He went to several cities and refined numerous scarlet fire spirit pills and fire elements divine vitality pill which he stuffed into the chest. The dragon Qilin was ineffably moved by such actions. Cult Master is really good to me. Qin Mu bought some black iron and black gold to forge strange spirit weapons on the way. The dragon Qilin couldn't understand what he wanted to do. He only saw some of the things refined by Qin Mu were flags, some were sacrificial altars, and some were tools of calculation like 8 trigrams, taiji, abacus, and 5-element talismans. After a few days, they came to Border Dragon City, but did not enter it. Qin Mu used 8 trigrams platform, taiji diagram, and numerous other tools of calculation to calculate while looking around his surroundings. He found the terrain and used a ruler to measure a nearby mountain. He then recorded a series of runes on a paper. The dragon Qilin went over to take a look, but he couldn't understand anything. There was no end to the calculations even when the sun was about to descend and the darkness about to come. When Qin Mu finally finished, he set up a sacrificial altar with flags all around it. He then stood upon it after chasing the dragon Qilin and the chest away. Cult Master, what is this for? The dragon Qilin asked from beside the chest. Qin Mu executed the flags and looked at the darkness in the surroundings. Another world soon appeared and overlapped with great ruins. In that world, countless devils moved around with their smoke-like bodies as they came from huge space holes. In Qin Mu's eyes, the people of the other world were fighting back against those devils. He was faced with a large-scale battlefield that was incomparably vast. Fatty Dragon, I've prepared enough spirit pills to last you a long time. Just stay with the chest for a few days. I plan to... His gaze was fixated on a running devil general on the battlefield. On the sacrificial altar, countless runes lit up, and the teleportation flags rustled. Go to another world. Boom! A loud explosion rang out, and Qin Mu and the teleportation flags instantly vanished. Instead, on the sacrificial altar, a devil general that was tall and sturdy suddenly appeared and looked around in a daze. Toot! Toot! The sound of the bugle horn was long, and countless flags fluttered, swirling to form a huge circle. Qin Mu suddenly appeared in the middle of a vast battlefield where countless soldiers of the devil army were rushing forward. They swept him along in their charge. In front of them was an incomparably majestic city with huge ships flying in the sky. Gods stood upright there with divine weapons in their hands and swept up countless soldiers and horses with each strike. Qin Mu had used the spell of sacrifice and teleportation formation to come to the world of the girl in the darkness. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 526 Descend. The dragon Qilin was stunned for a moment before coming to a realization. Qin Mu had used the method of sacrifice to turn himself into a sacrificial offering. Like that, he transferred himself to another world while his existence was replaced by a devil general of another world to maintain the balance of the two worlds. Has Cult Master's calculations reached such a profound level already? How did he calculate that? The dragon Qilin stared with his eyes wide open. After following the young patriarch for many years, he also had extremely high attainments in calculations. If it wasn't because he was lazy, he would have certainly become one of the top-notch calculation experts in the world. However, the technique of calculation Qin Mu had used baffled even him. He knew the theory, but when thinking about how to execute it, his mind was a blank sheet of paper. The method of sacrifice transformed blood and flesh into energy, transferring them into another world to replace the life form in the other world. However, Qin Mu didn't change himself into energy, but transferred himself in a complete state to the other world. There were too many considerations required for that, which surpassed the Dragon Qilin's scope and horizons. Qin Mu not only used calculation, but also included Dutian Devil King's method of sacrifice, as well as the methods of space measurement, teleportation. All of that required unbelievable amounts of knowledge. Only part of what he did would be more than enough for numerous divine arts practitioners to study for life. Cult Master used himself as a sacrificial offering to transfer himself to another world this time. But how is he coming back? The Dragon Qilin immediately thought of the crux of the matter and looked at the Devil General, who was still in a daze. He then immediately shouted out, "Stand there and don't move." The Devil General was still confused at what had just happened. He was clearly rushing forward earlier, but it was cleared not through this place. He lowered his head and saw a monster that looked like a hybrid between a pig and dragon covered in scales and an even stranger chest. It was the unbelievably fat monster that had spoken. The Devil General looked around himself, noting the incomparably intense darkness. He muttered, "Yikahai, what is this place?" The Dragon Qilin lifted the chest up and threw it at that Devil General. The creature gave a cold snort and raised his hands to grab the projectile. The next moment, however, the chest opened up and swallowed him with a gulp. Bang! The chest landed on the sacrificial altar with the Devil General overturning seas and rivers inside it. He made the chest stagger left and right from the beatings, jumping up and down irregularly. The moment the Dragon Qilin threw the chest out, he had risen into the air. When the chest landed, he landed on its top, pressing down on it. The Devil General in the chest was extremely strong and nearly blew him off still. He hurriedly said, "We can't let him out. No matter what, we can't let him out. We have to keep him around so that when Cult Master wants to come back, he can sacrifice him again. But the spirit pills that Cult Master left for me can't last too long. Wait a minute. My spirit pills are all in the chest." The Dragon Qilin let out a miserable cry. The voice of a bugle horn became more and more resounding, as though the instrument was blown beside Qin Mu's ears, nearly deafening him. He turned back to take a look, and violent air current flooded over. The sound waves suppressed it, making his skin ripple. Behind him were long elephant tusks that were over 30 yards long and filled with steel knives. 3 huge elephants that had devil markings all over its body was pulling a cloud chariot. Its tusks swung left and right, impaling over a dozen devils on the steel knives. Once caught, those people could only flail about with the swinging motion. On the cloud chariot was a horn of a strange beast that was even longer than the elephant's tusks. It had been hollowed out and turned into a bugle horn at whose end 2 or even 3 men could stand. A deafening sound came from that bugle horn. On the chariot, a devil giant roused his vital chi to blow the bugle horn. The sound was so loud that it spread throughout the entire battlefield. The incomparably huge cloud chariot disregarded friend and foe, crushing everything in its way with the huge elephant and wheels. They crushed so many devils that were rushing forward that blood and flesh were splattered everywhere. Qin Mu's surroundings were filled with devils clad in black armor swinging their weapons. Without much thought, he began to sprint frantically in the same direction, toward the battlefield. "A Piu Gaonan Ham, who are you?" A devil immediately realized that Qin Mu wasn't one of them and gave him a puzzled look. The next moment his head flew up high. The sword pellet flew out from Qin Mu's Taotai sack and into his hand. It hummed there, and countless swords rushed out from the 2 sides of his fist. They created an illusion of a double-edged longsword. Both sides were pointy, and the blade was 40 yards long. Qin Mu rotated his sword in a circle and swept it in all directions. All of the devil soldiers pouncing over instantly turned into limbs flying in the sky. The huge elephant that ran toward him also had its front feet severed and crashed headlong into the ground, snapping its tusks. Behind, the huge cloud chariot rose into midair and flipped over as it flew over Qin Mu's head. The devil giant on the chariot watched him while standing upside down. When he saw Qin Mu, his eyes widened in astonishment. Next, a sword stabbed his head and nailed him to the chariot. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief after he settled the danger of being trampled by the huge elephant and the cloud chariot. He looked back, and his scalp couldn't help crawling. Behind him were countless huge elephants pulling cloud chariots driven by devils toward the battlefield on the opposite side. The noise from the heavy feet landing repeatedly on the ground was like thunder rumbling across the battlefield. Behind the huge cloud chariots, there were numerous strange beasts that were even larger than the huge elephants. They sprinted frantically with fierce-looking devil gods standing on their backs with devil god weapons in their hands. Those weapons exploded with terrifying power and swept through the sky of the battlefield, humming as they went straight for the gods on the opposite side. Magnificent and dazzling yet abnormally terrifying ripples wreaked havoc in the sky above the battlefield. The power of the gods and devils' weapons collided and warped space. All kinds of lights danced in the sky, world-shaking blades of color sweeping to and fro in the sky. Ripples spread in all directions, promising sure death for those flying. Qin Mu quickly determined his situation, and his expression became grim. The place he was at was right in front of the devil army. The soldiers located at this position were obviously the lowest cannon fodder, expendables used to rush the enemy's base and test its defense. Since Qin Mu was located among the expendables and about to clash with the enemy's people, there was a high chance he'd become an expendable too. A Piu Gao Nanhan? A shouted question came from the cloud chariot in the back as numerous devil giants looked at him in suspicion. Ku de Gay Lu, one of you. Qin Mu immediately shouted back at them. Countless devil soldiers jumped out of the cloud chariots, but unlike before, they were the elites of the devil race. They swarmed in like a flood, rushing at him frantically while shouting, "Ha Tiaila, kill!" Qin Mu no longer hesitated and turned to run. He was confused though. I said that I was one of them, so why do they still want to kill me? The elites were not the lowly devils that were rushing forward as the vanguard. These people had powerful abilities and belonged to the heavenly devil horde. Qin Mu had once fought with it in the living realm of the dead and so knew that their abilities were indeed astonishing. Heavenly devil horde was hidden behind the cloud chariot and would only attack after the lowly devils in the vanguard had barged into the battle formation of the enemy and scattered them. At this moment, countless people from Heavenly Devil Horde went chasing after Qin Mu, planning to get rid of this human divine arts practitioners that had appeared from God alone knew where. Shouts came from the back, and the lowly devils received the order to attack Qin Mu, who was running away as well. There was an extremely high number of lowly devils, and they swarmed over like a black flood, drowning Qin Mu out. 8,000 swords! He shouted out furiously, and the huge sword in his hand suddenly burst forth. Countless sword lights swirled frantically, and the vanguard was instantly sliced into chunks of flesh. The 8,000 swords were like a huge ball of light that rolled around the vanguard, mincing everything in its path. Whoosh! The rolling ball of light crushed the horde until a strong practitioner of celestial being realm among the lowly devils roared angrily. His body expanded, his bulging muscles bursting apart his clothes and armor. He grew to over 30 yards tall, and swept his huge mace in all directions to get rid of the lowly devils in his way. His mace was forged using secret techniques and could be separated into 36 sections. They were interlocked and spun rapidly in different directions, slicing his own people into pieces. That devil officer swept everyone away and raised his huge mace over Qin Mu. He could hear endless clinks as the 8,000 swords gathered rapidly to form a huge shield, blocking his attack. The body of the devil officer swayed, and two bangs rang out as two more arms popped out from under his armpits. They caught the huge shield in place while his other two hands raised the mace high up to smash down once more. Qin Mu transformed into Saturn's sovereign. Behind him, Gate of Heaven Influence, which was dozens of yards tall, appeared and opened up. The gate protected his back by taking the souls of all the devils rushing at his back into Yudu. Boom! He raised his hands and sent his palm against the devil officer. Both of their magic powers burst forth along with their divine arts. Before the mace of the devil officer could even land, his body was blown into the air by Qin Mu and sent into a bunch of devils. Some of those lowly beings died straight away, but by then, the fastest of heavenly devil horde had already reached them. A knife pellet flew through the sky, heading straight for Qin Mu's face. That knife pellet spun frantically, and countless devil knives flew out, slashing at him frantically. Heavenly Spirit's escarpment. Qin Mu shouted out, and his hands pushed forward. Chancellor Ba Shan's Heavenly Spirit's escarpment was easily executed, and stars spread out like chess pieces. Sun, moon, and the 5-element stars were the main 7 stars. They were the biggest and transformed into a light screen which caught the curved blades in the air. Next, Heavenly Spirit escarpment suddenly shattered. Qin Mu gave a dull grunt and stumbled backward. The first person from Heavenly Devil Horde who had rushed over was a handsome youth of the Azura race among the 8 divisions of the Heavenly Devil. He stretched his hands out, and countless curved knives flew over to form a knife pellet in his hand. The Azura swung his hand, and his knife pellet rang as it formed 2 long knives. At the same time, the other curved knives in the knife pellet became incomparably fine and flew out through the gaps of his fingers like flowing sand to swirl around him. The Azura raised the curved knives in his hands and attacked Qin Mu like a whirlwind. Clang! The 2 of them clashed, and Qin Mu moved to shake off the strength of a blow. What strength! The Azura was also blown back. He took a fraction of a moment to compose himself, then rushed toward Qin Mu at an even faster speed. Qin Mu took a step and pushed forward with a palm. The light in front of him wavered, and his vital qi transformed into a fixed word. The Azura's body froze for a moment. When he was about to move again, though, Qin Mu's sword swept across him, and a heart flew into the sky. Even though you're very strong, you're still slightly inferior to me. Qin Mu narrowed his eyes as even more Heavenly Devil Horde people came to his side. Every one of them was no inferior to the Azura, which made his scalp crawl. At that moment, however, a world-shaking bang came from the battlefield. It was the collision of the 2 armies. In an instant, flesh and blood flew into the air. The sky suddenly turned dark, and in the center of the battlefield, a sacrificial altar rose through the gore. The rising land threw Qin Mu and the Heavenly Devil Horde soldiers away. Qin Mu looked over in a hurry, and his heart couldn't help leaping in shock. That sacrificial altar was used for blood sacrifice and was quite similar to the one he had made to teleport himself to this world. The main use of the giant altar was clearly to use the flesh and blood in the battle as sacrifices for a powerful existence from another world. This sacrificial altar is hundreds of times larger than the one I made. Who could have buried it here? When he landed on the ground, he was drowned out by the Heavenly Devil Horde before he had time to think more. The sacrificial altar at that moment lit up, and countless runes swirled on its sides, shining in all directions. Blood light streaked across the sky, rushing up to blow a hole through the clouds. Boom! A huge axe descended from the sky, followed by a gorgeous and fierce tiger. His body was surrounded with all kinds of gorgeous divine markings. My lord! The fierce tiger roared, and a familiar figure appeared on its back. Qin Mu looked at it with a blank expression. Because of his distraction, he was almost gutted by the Heavenly Devil Horde. On the sacrificial altar, he had seen a familiar person holding an axe while riding the divine tiger. It was Saint Woodcutter who had imparted his teachings on the rock. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 527 Divine Arts on the Battlefield. Why would Saint Woodcutter appear here? The sacrificial altar he used seemed to have been long prepared. So could it be that the people of this world were the ones who had summoned him? Qin Mu's mind was blown. The sacrificial altar had been buried right in the center of the battlefield, so when the 2 armies clashed, flesh and blood activated it, summoning Saint Woodcutter. It was evident that this had been long prepared. Qin Mu immediately remembered Hermit Qing Yu's saying about Saint Woodcutter reviving a month ago and leaving with his axe. Saint Woodcutter had to have received some news, which was why he woke up from his slumber to use a sacrificial ceremony to descend to this world. Qin Mu blocked the opponent's attack from behind him, and Gate of Heaven influence suddenly grew bigger. His body spun, and Gate of Heaven influence also swirled after, instantly sending many souls to Yudu before they could even grunt. Whoosh! The tiger god that was carrying Saint Woodcutter jumped off the sacrificial altar and headed straight for the enemy camp. He looked at Qin Mu with astonishment, and a world-shaking voice rumbled. "My lord, that looks like your younger generation." From the tiger's back, Saint Woodcutter looked back and saw Qin Mu fighting the heavenly devil horde with the gate of heaven influence. His gaze was bright, and he lighted up the whole area around the sacrificial altar. Weird. How did he come to Supreme Emperor Heaven? Saint Woodcutter looked away. Wherever the tiger god passed, devils and horses were thrown aside. When the tiger god roared, sound waves burst forth, sending countless devils into the air. When Qin Mu saw this sight, the dragon Qilin's oversized tummy flashed through his mind. He couldn't help envying Saint Woodcutter. This tiger god refers to him as his lord, so he should be his mount. He's truly majestic. On the tiger's back, Saint Woodcutter raised the axe in his hand and split apart Devil God's divine arts that were flying at him. With a few ups and downs, the tiger god carried him into the enemy camp. From the time the tiger god leaped down the sacrificial altar to when he reached the enemy camp was only a matter of a few breaths. Saint Woodcutter raised his huge axe, and with a raise and a fall of his hand, the 4 heads of a 4-headed devil god in the camp flew off before he could even get up. Ha Tiaila! Devil gods rushed over and circled the tiger god. Saint Woodcutter, who sat on its back, raised his huge axe. Its light surged forth like a flood. Great educational, heavenly devil scriptures. No, what he executed should be the complete Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. Qin Mu was forced back continuously by the heavenly devil horde and had to move up the altar. While doing so, he'd noticed Saint Woodcutter's attack just then from the corner of his eye. His comprehension of Overlord Body 3 elixir technique far surpasses mine. Saint Woodcutter wasn't only swinging his axe. His other hand was executing all kinds of divine arts from great educational heavenly devil scriptures. However, they weren't just single arts but were combinations of different ones, just like Li Tianxing's great overarching heavenly stars palm force. After mastering hundreds of divine arts via comprehensive study, he matched them into a kind of divine art. If it were others, they wouldn't have been able to see that his divine art was even great educational heavenly devil scriptures. However, as heavenly devil cult master, Qin Mu immediately recognized it. Around Saint Woodcutter, all kinds of strange force fields burst forth and blew the devil gods away. At that instant, a huge axe suddenly went to them and cut off their heads. The strength of its battle power was extremely terrifying. Qin Mu wanted to observe Saint Woodcutter's divine arts in detail, but more and more of the heavenly devil horde surrounded him. After Saint Woodcutter had been summoned, he went for the head of the enemy and entered the camp to kill devil gods. He ignored the rest of the heavenly devil army, so countless devils were still flooding into the battlefield and killing the enemies. At this moment, even more heavenly devil horde flooded over, but the divine arts practitioners behind the sacrificial altar were also pushing forward. The noise of the battle was world-shaking. In this kind of large-scale divine arts battle, the power of one man was insignificant. If a person got distracted, they could die under the enemy's attack at any moment. Qin Mu couldn't waste any more time and abandoned all considerations to just fight with all he had. The abilities of heavenly devil horde were strangely powerful. The techniques and divine arts of the devils and eternal peace were poles apart. The former may be lacking in intricateness of the moves, but they were outstanding in their magic power. Heavenly devil horde had its extraordinary points there. Their corporeal bodies were different from those of the human race. Their 8 divisions were as such: fish-scaled webbed frogs, magma giants, beautiful youths, ugly women, scorpion-tailed ladies, 8-clawed women, 8-tentacled mutants, and snake-handed mutants. These devils had a higher bloodline and were natural fighting machines that had extremely strong battle power. The ones around Qin Mu were the elites, and not one was any weaker than him. More and more heavenly devil horde rushed up the sacrificial altar, and there were as many as 10 people. They saw that the gate of heaven influence behind Qin Mu was incomparably strange and avoided it while working together to attack. Qin Mu fought against them with all his strength, and the 8,000 swords shuttled back and forth. Countless sword lights flooded in when the flying swords scattered like locusts. In a split second, mountains and rivers appeared, forming sword-treading mountains and rivers. On the sacrificial altar, mountains stretched endlessly, waterfalls fell, and long rivers flowed. The terrifying fights earlier had vanished without a trace. Yet the next moment, blood flowed out from this picture of mountains and rivers, dyeing the mountains and rivers red. They then crumbled, and a magma giant swung a huge hammer after raising from the shattered mountains and rivers. Qin Mu retreated and raised his hands up high. Carefree Sword flew over, and the other 8,000 swords rushed over. In the blink of an eye, they all merged into Carefree Sword. The magma giant smashed down with a hammer, and terrifying air currents rushed in all directions, sweeping countless corpses around the sacrificial altars into the air. Qin Mu held his sword in both hands against that magma giant's hammer that spun as fast as the wind. Only a clink was heard when they collided, but Qin Mu trembled violently as he got sent into midair. At that moment, the magma giant was sliced into two along with his hammer. Before Qin Mu even landed on the ground, he saw an 8-clawed woman opening her claws wide. The corpses in midair were blasted apart, and the blood covered the surroundings, drowning the youth. Qin Mu swung Carefree Sword, and it separated. 8,000 swords combined to form two long knives which crossed each other. Knife lights created something akin to a moon in the sky. The moonlit knife lights merged into one and suddenly exploded. Rays of light shot down like meteors. Swoosh! The blood fog was cut, and the 8-clawed woman saw starlight. Her claws tapped it, and sounds of collision rang out. Moonlight and starlight penetrated her body, dismembering her. The sixth form of butcher's pig slaughtering knife skills. The long knife hangs below the moonlight. Among the stars the heavenly horses are startled. Qin Mu loosened his grip on the sword, and the two long knives flew up to separate into countless flying swords that circled around him to block the thousands of devil knives coming at him. Flipping his hand to strike out with a madra, the knife-skill devil expert that was attacking Runt before exploding into pieces. Boom, boom, boom. Thunder rumbled and exploded over 10 miles. Wherever Qin Mu's yin-yang heaven-flipping hands passed, people and horses were overturned. With another madra from his main hand, the ice froze the land for over 10 miles. An index finger tapped on the heart of brows, and the flying swords followed the path of yin-yang heaven-flipping hands to spiral forward and make blood to flow like the river. Spiral sword form. Suddenly, two huge pythons coiled around Qin Mu and twisted crazily. A snake woman had jumped into the air and bound him with her arms, which were snakes. Qin Mu raised his head, and two rays shot out from his eyes. Holes opened up in the chest of the snake woman, killing her, but the snake arms still brought him to midair as well. Below him, an ugly woman suddenly slammed the calabash behind her, and its mouth opened. With a whoosh, blood-colored devil chi spewed out and went straight for Qin Mu. True dragon overlord body. Qin Mu shouted out furiously and broke free of the snake arms. With a madra, the apparition of a volcano suddenly appeared behind him. It stood tall as it suddenly erupted. Magnetic raging inferno palm. He smacking his palm in the direction below himself, and the blood-colored devil chi was incinerated along with the ugly woman. Superb divine art. Among the divine arts practitioners of 7 Stars Realm, you can place in the top 10. Qin Mu was astonished when he heard the stiff voice. He looked down and saw a great general of heavenly devil horde running up the sacrificial altar with his head raised to look at him. That heavenly devil great general had huge flags behind his back. While rushing up, his body suddenly shook, and 4 heads, as well as 8 arms, popped out. He held long knives which crossed each other. His footsteps changed unpredictably as he killed all the divine arts practitioners on his way. Primordial spirit projection. The heavenly devil great general smacked the back of his knife against his head, and a primordial spirit that was 30 yards tall leaped out from his body. It roared toward the sky and raised its hand to blast a madra at Qin Mu. It was almost half a field wide, with markings coiling around one another within it and displaying all kinds of devil markings that were glowing bright before dimming at intervals. Devil markings danced, but before they even came to Qin Mu's sides, devil runes that looked like chains appeared around him to bind him. Yet he definitely couldn't receive the power of that palm. Carefree Sword and the other flying swords were flying back, but they were too far away to save him. At that moment, Qin Mu saw that Saint Woodcutter's 5 fingers come together and all kinds of divine arts from great educational heavenly devil scriptures merge into one. Their power burst forth and blew a devil god into pieces. Inspiration struck Qin Mu, and he also put all his 5 fingers together. His Overlord Body 3 elixir technique instantly circulated in a strange pattern. His spirit embryo and soul merged together. The 5 elements shone brightly. The 6 directions became one. 7 stars rose into the sky, and the sun and moon rotated. Bang, bang, bang. Boundless energy flooded out from Qin Mu's body and snapped the devil-marking chains around him. He then raised his hand to welcome the fierce palm from the heavenly devil great general's primordial spirit. Qin Mu grunted and bounced up high into the sky where countless divine arts, as well as weapons of the gods and devils, were wreaking havoc. If he went any higher, he would definitely die miserably. Countless runes appeared around his body and swirled around him. Just as Qin Mu was about to fly into the forbidden area in the sky, he vanished. Bang! He fell over 10 miles away. The terrifying palm force from the heavenly devil great general's primordial spirit had made him tumble and crash into a bunch of divine arts practitioners that were rushing forward. Qin Mu tumbled dozens of times before stabilizing himself. Countless divine arts practitioners rushed past him. Soon after, they raised all kinds of spirit weapons into the air before sending them to the ground diagonally like rain, completely covering the land before themselves. It was hard to say how many devils had died from that avalanche of spirit weapons. "I'm still alive?" Qin Mu hurriedly checked his body and discovered that even though he was covered in injuries, the sure-kill attack from that heavenly devil great general had not injured him. He couldn't help being surprised and delighted. That move of Saint Woodcutter has unbelievable power. Could he have known I was in trouble and purposely executed this move for me to learn and survive that sure death situation? He stretched his hand out to grab emptiness. Carefree Sword brought the other flying swords back before they changed back into a sword pellet in his palm. Suddenly, a crisp voice came from behind him. "I seem to have seen you before." Qin Mu turned back and saw a towering god behind him. On its shoulder was a girl with 2 braids. Her head was tilted as she examined him. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 528, Braid Girl and Shadow Boy. "You're the long braid girl." As Qin Mu examined the girl with the 2 long braids, he couldn't help thinking about the girl he had met in the darkness. In delight, he asked, "Is that really you?" The girl back then had also had 2 long braids, but because they were situated in 2 different worlds, they couldn't talk or even see each other's faces. They could only take note of the other's silhouette. They had once been through a long night together and avoided the pursuit of the heavenly devil horde. But the sun had risen, and the darkness retreated. The girl had then vanished along with the dark realm. The girl standing on the shoulder of the god in front of Qin Mu also had long braids that were hanging down to her waist. When she heard the mention of a girl with long braids, and she couldn't help becoming delighted and surprised, she hurriedly jumped down from the shoulder of the god and came to Qin Mu in a few footsteps. 2 small dimples appeared on her cheeks. "You're that shadow boy, Father. He is that shadow boy that later disappeared." The god lowered his head and looked at Qin Mu. He asked suspiciously, "If you're that shadow, why do you have a physical body now? We saw you battling earlier, and it was truly extraordinary. We were wondering where had such an expert came from. You're on 7 Stars Realm? For divine arts practitioners of 7 Stars Realm to have such achievements like yours is very rare in Supreme Emperor Heaven. You're a truly formidable youth." Qin Mu's heart trembled slightly. There are divine arts practitioners of 7 Stars Realm here that are stronger than me? Are they overlord bodies? Overlord bodies? The god picked them up to carry forward while asking with a blank face, "What's overlord body? I've never heard of it before." They are all youths with the aptitude of true gods, the kings among the spirit bodies. They were born extraordinary and aren't any overlord bodies. Kings of the spirit bodies? Qin Mu blinked. He had never heard of kings among the spirit bodies, and his mind blanked out. However, Excitement grew in his heart once more. Kings among the spirit bodies, youths with aptitudes of true gods. He had been right to come to this world. He had treated himself as an offering to teleport his body to this world. In the battlefield, he had already noticed the extraordinary points of the heavenly devil horde. Their abilities were extremely strong, and if any of them were put in eternal peace, they would all be people who wouldn't be inferior to Pan Gongzhou. Of course, in terms of escaping abilities, Pan Gongzhou would still be unrivaled. Supreme Emperor Heaven has been through some 20,000 years of baptism of war. The paths, skills, and divine arts here must have improved at a godly speed. Over here, I might find the way to defeat First Ancestor Human Emperor. His hands clenched into tight fists. Defeating First Ancestor Human Emperor had become his biggest goal. Since he couldn't find hope in defeating him in eternal peace, he might as well go look for it in Supreme Emperor Heaven. Even if he couldn't find it, knowing more paths, skills, and divine arts could also assist him in improving himself. Suddenly, the god rushed into the battlefield, leaving them behind. "You guys remain here." Far away, a tear ripped open in space, and 6 pitch-black hands pulled out. They grabbed hold of the corners of the crack and tried to pull it open wider. The god rushed forward and pulled out his sword to cut off those hands. But just as he took care of 2, a huge hammer suddenly came and sent him away. A devil god had arrived to stop him. The long braid girl watched the battlefield with concentration for a time. She only let out a sigh of relief when she saw that her father was fine and had returned to kill the devil that had attacked him. "Hey, you guys were not here originally, so why have you appeared here?" He was slightly confused. The place in which he had met this girl was the hinterland of Great Ruins, while this place was the borders of Great Ruins that were 20 to 30,000 miles apart. By right, she shouldn't have been anywhere nearby. The long braid girl's face fell. "After you vanished, our city was invaded and many people died. Father was the one that rescued us and brought us to this brilliance-injured city." She rushed forward, and Qin Mu followed after her in a hurry. "When I disappeared, it was just as the night became day. So didn't the devils in your Supreme Emperor Heaven vanish?" The long braid girl was puzzled. Why would they vanish? Qin Mu was stunned. He had thought that Supreme Emperor Heaven was like Great Ruins and also faced the invasion of darkness. When he had walked through it and the darkness retreated, he had also left Supreme Emperor Heaven. It looks like Dutian Devil King was right. The world barrier between Supreme Emperor Heaven and the Devil's world has been compressed and broken. Qin Mu was astonished. Since his guess was completely accurate, his other guess will probably come true as well. After the devils take over Supreme Emperor Heaven, they will sacrifice it for the Devil world to collide with Eternal Peace world. But how can I stop that? The long braid girl rushed down to the altar while saying quickly, "You have fought for a while, so you should go to Brilliance Injured City to rest first. I still need to fight with the army. This bit of injury is nothing." Qin Mu quickly caught up with her and said, "I'm also an apothecary and am quite famous in my world. I've already treated myself just now. I've come here to seek stronger skills, since many in my world have been lost throughout the ages." The mountain-like sacrificial altar had already been taken by the Heavenly Devil Horde with the lead of the Heavenly Devil General that had blown Qin Mu over 10 miles away. Several hundred soldiers of the Heavenly Devil Horde were fighting with divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven up the altar. The latter's situation was extremely bitter. The Heavenly Devil General at the highest point of the sacrificial altar was casting divine arts. In the sky, lumps of dark lightning rolled and scattered through the ground. Everywhere they passed, the flesh of divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven would dissolve, turning them into running skeletons. Qin Mu narrowed his eyes. The fierceness and strangeness of the divine arts of the devil race were even higher than what the divine arts practitioners that cultivated the devil path in Heavenly Devil Cult could show. The long braid girl rushed up the altar. "My father and I had seen it when we were observing the battle in Brilliance Injured City. Even though you are very powerful, your magic power is ridiculously strong, your divine arts are incomparably exquisite, your achievements in the divine arts are extremely high, your techniques seem to have a problem. You showed no true god-level techniques, and my father said that there's a gap in your civilization. The girl faced a heavenly devil horde soldier who was an Asura with extremely strong abilities and corporeal body. His attacks were incomparably fast when he suddenly trembled, revealing all kinds of rune markings as though they were carved into his skin. However, the corporeal body of the long braid girl was also ridiculously strong. The two of them fought with speed, hiding their divine arts between their palms and fingers. Like that, the outcome of the battle was decided in an instant. The long braid girl shattered the heart of her opponent by jabbing at the heart of his brows. The head of that Asura exploded, and his corpse fell to the ground, rolling down the steps of the altar. The corners of Qin Mu's eyes twitched. He saw that the divine arts of the girl weren't more exquisite than his. In truth, they were really crude, but her technique had extraordinary points. The long braid girl continued to fight her way up the altar while speaking to him. Father said that many parts of your body are already no inferior to those of the divine arts practitioners with aptitudes of true God. For example, your hands, heart, dantian, legs, and eyes have already reached extremely high achievements. However, your hands are hands, legs are legs, heart is heart, dantian is dantian. Looking at them alone, your achievements are extremely high, but your corporeal body hasn't unified them, so you have not reached the aptitude of a true god. Compared to a young true god, you're slightly inferior. Throughout her speech, she killed several people with her fierceness. She walked step by step up to the top of the sacrificial altar. With her breaking up the disposition of troops, the other divine arts practitioners gained spirit and frantically rushed toward the top of the altar as well. Yet more heavenly devil horde flooded over to block them, holding back their momentum. Qin Mu transformed into Saturn Sovereign's form and swept gate of heaven influence forward. The heavenly devil horde soldiers which got caught instantly lost their souls and collapsed. He looked around and nodded. The long braid girl had been right. The divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven indeed possessed an advantage over the divine arts practitioners of Eternal Peace. Their divine arts weren't exquisite, but their power was much stronger. Their changes in moves couldn't be compared to those in Eternal Peace, but because of their strong corporeal bodies, the power of their moves was much greater. This should have been the effect of their techniques. Even people as powerful as Butcher, Mute, Cripple, Granny C, Blind, and the rest had only one thing in which they were skilled and had cultivated to God realm. They couldn't reach such heights in all fields. Even if it was a sicko like Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, the saint that appears once every 500 years, he too couldn't reach God realm in every field. Yet the techniques of the divine arts practitioners in Supreme Emperor Heaven were a grade higher, so all parts of their bodies had received training. They developed in all fields, and so their battle power was even greater. No wonder all of the divine arts practitioners and devils in Supreme Emperor Heaven are so strong. Qin Mu suddenly had a feeling of the dark clouds parting and the sky becoming clear. The purpose of his journey was to find the method to defeat First Ancestor Human Emperor, and now he finally saw a ray of dawn. However, your magic power is strong and your divine arts are exquisite, so even though you are lacking, you can still hold your place in a battlefield. In Supreme Emperor Heaven, there shouldn't be many people stronger than you on the same realm. The long braid girl continued to talk in a loud voice, telling Qin Mu about her father's opinion of him. Your technique is too scattered, though. When you train your eyes, you just train your eyes. When you train your hands, you just train your hands. And when you train your heart, you just train your heart. You're training all of them separately. If you unified all parts of your body and was able to cultivate your corporeal body, magic power, primordial spirit, and also divine arts together, you would have another astonishing leap in power. However, all of this happened because your technique was too scattered. If you wanted to combine everything into one now, it would probably be incomparably difficult. Qin Mu let out a shaky breath. The long braid girl was only passing on her father's opinion since she couldn't have that kind of judgment and knowledge herself, but she had indeed pointed out Qin Mu's weakness, or in fact, the entire Eternal Peace Empire's weakness. Throughout that land's history, as long as the divine arts practitioners gained achievements in one area, it would be enough for them to stand at the top of the world. However, since they didn't string all these achievements together, the technique had never become a system. This was because they were all the later generations of people who had escaped from the disaster 20,000 years, and there was a huge gap in their inheritance. They had cultivated hard and the wise had researched the divine arts, but they could never break through the shackles of technique. The two finally fought to the top of the sacrificial altar. Hundreds of divine arts practitioners fought against the heavenly devil horde that was attacking up from below while the rest surrounded heavenly devil general. A bunch of dogs and chickens. The heavenly devil general laughed loudly with his primordial spirit standing behind him overflowing with flames. His four heads surveyed the surroundings as the huge flags on his back flew up. He sneered and said, "Killing you guys is as easy as flipping over a palm." The long braid girl and the rest looked at him with grim expressions. The heavenly devil general's abilities were extremely high, and even Qin Mu didn't dare to receive his attack head-on. The four-headed devil could probably take one of their lives with a single move. Looks like the next step of Eternal Peace Empire's reform should deal with technique. Beside the braid girl, Qin Mu seemed to be in deep thought as he took out a huge jade eye from his Taotai sack. His hand made some tweak at its back. "Do you think I can construct a bridge to connect eternal peace to your Supreme Emperor Heaven?" Qin Mu asked. "I want the divine arts practitioners of eternal peace to come here for experience and to open up their horizons." The long braid girl was extremely nervous, and cold sweat kept rolling down her forehead. She said angrily, "Why are you asking so many questions? Stop thinking about other things for now. With the enemy in front of us, if we don't kill him." Light burst forth from the jade eye, and the heavenly devil general leaped up, but he was still split apart in midair. Qin Mu closed the jade eye and took out a bunch of tools for calculation along with stacks of papers before squatting down on the ground to record some numerical symbols. Next, he took out a bunch of measuring spirit weapons, then continued to draw. He didn't even raise his head, and when he said, "I want to construct a bridge that could connect the two worlds together. However, that requires a huge amount of calculations. Do you have any experts skilled in calculations? I think if we can maintain the balance of the two worlds' energy, it should be possible." "What happened? Why are you all looking at me with such strange gazes?" Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 529, Sun Creator of Supreme Emperor Heaven. The two halves of the heavenly devil general fell from the sky before he had even breathed his last. When he landed, he twitched a few times. He was an expert of celestial being realm and had even grown four heads. Qin Mu had used Moon Jade Eye to slice him into half, but with his powerful life force, he didn't die from that right away. His four heads stared ruthlessly at Qin Mu, but he gradually ran out of energy and died. In the surroundings, numerous divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven couldn't wipe away the astonishment on their faces. They stared blankly at the big boy that was calculating by himself in the bloody battlefield. The fiendish heavenly devil general had been a great expert of celestial being realm, and a famous young strong practitioner among the devil race to top that. His abilities were profound and ineffable, so if he had made his move, hundreds of people would have probably died on the altar. Yet he had been stopped. "Who is this?" A divine arts practitioner of Supreme Emperor Heaven asked in a low voice. Beside him, someone said, "He was devil god Fu Riluo's disciple, and among the devil experts of celestial being realm, he is ranked number 7. He was known as a strong practitioner that would grow into a true devil, the most favorite disciple of Fu Riluo." "No, I'm talking about him. I have no idea." The long braid girl pulled Qin Mu up with a smile. "You just killed Fu Yuxiao. This fellow had a very high position among the devils of celestial being realm. You've done huge merit." Qin Mu took a glance at the corpse with astonishment. His position was high? No wonder then that he was so powerful. If I hadn't learned that move from Saint Woodcutter, I probably wouldn't have even been able to take a blow from him. He squatted down again and continued to calculate. The long braid girl looked at the jade eye and asked suspiciously, "How did you kill him?" "This eye. It was made by gods during High Emperor era. They constructed the formation on the moon to use its power," Qin Mu said before focusing on his calculations once more. Fu Yuxiao had 4 heads which controlled his body at the same time. This would result in a conflict of consciousness, but when he encountered something, his four heads didn't control his body separately. His reaction should have been muscle memory. I just needed to calculate it according to his divine arts and moves and what his muscles would do when he's in danger. After knowing that, I activated this moon jade eye. When he jumped into the sky, he would collide with the ray and kill himself. The long braid girl stared at him with her eyes wide open, astonishment evident on her face. He would jump into the attack to kill himself? Calculations could be used like that? How had he calculated it? Do you have any experts skilled in algebra here? Qin Mu opened his Taotai sack, and the calculation spirit weapons flew back inside. He frowned and said, "To build the world bridge, a lot of calculations are needed. If it was just me doing it, I reckon I'd need half a year to calculate the equation for sacrificial spirit energy conversion and shifting. Only then would I be able to establish the space algebra model for the bridge that stretches across the two worlds." The surroundings were silent. After a moment, the long braid girl asked in an astringent voice, "What did you just say?" "Equation." Equation. Mathematical equation is used to find the variable. Variable? You guys don't know what's variable? Variable is the unknown. Algebra, it's the unknown quantity. Qin Mu raised his head and looked at the expressions of the divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven. These people looked at him as though they were listening to a heavenly book. He couldn't help having a bad feeling and probed. "You guys don't have 10 computational canons here? The most basic 9 writings of calculation? Also never learned them before? How about computational canon of supreme mystery? Have you learned computational canon of native woman? You should have learned the circulatory cycle stars array equation at least, right? This is the calculation regarding meteorological phenomenon." Everyone in the surroundings shook their heads in a daze. The long braid girl said, "What's the use of learning calculations?" The other people nodded and said with smiles, "We're always fighting on the battlefield, so where would we find the time to learn this? The fastest way to raise our abilities is to train, learn divine arts, and comprehend them." Qin Mu looked at them with anger. "You guys don't calculate meteorological phenomenon? You guys should have calculated the trajectory of the stars in the sky at least, right?" Everyone's expression grew weird, and Qin Mu was bewildered by it. Suddenly, a divine arts practitioner said, "There are no stars in the sky, so what do we calculate?" Qin Mu was stunned and raised his head to look at the sky. The sky of Supreme Emperor Heaven was pitch black, without any stars, just 2 halves of a sun. Qin Mu saw some large-scale constructions on the broken surfaces, but they weren't complete. The half-suns were actually forged. They weren't naturally formed. The thing that made him not know whether to laugh or cry was that the halves weren't even round. When he had come here the last time, he didn't see any sun since it had been nighttime. Only this time did he see that the sun of Supreme Emperor Heaven was made up of 2 separate halves, and neither of them was even circular. One was a little cubic, the other a little oval, and both distorted in some areas. Qin Mu wanted for nothing more than to fly to the sky and destroy the 2 suns. Even if Eternal Peace's astronomical phenomenon were fake, they were all formations, and the gods and devils that had constructed them to trick the people were extremely serious. No matter if it was the sun or the moon, they were all round and without any flaws. Even the stars, constellations, and galaxies in the sky were made quite vividly, hiding their fake nature from Dao sect's Taoists for 20,000 years. As a result, Tao Master Lin Xian's Tao heart had collapsed the moment he realized this secret. But it was even worse for Supreme Emperor Heaven, since their half-suns had been made extremely sloppily. With a blank mind, Qin Mu shook his head. The impact that this sight brought him was even stronger than the first sighting of sunship. Of course, it had been a shock brought by the superlative craftsmanship, while this one was the shock brought by the sloppiness of the craft. Not even 1 star. You guys indeed don't need circulatory cycle stars array equation. Qin Mu nodded repeatedly, and the dragon Qilin came to his mind. The divine arts practitioners of this world don't have high attainments in algebra. I had only brought Fatty Dragon along. Things would be much easier for me. The divine arts practitioners of this world were fighting daily because of the invasion of the devil race. If they wanted to live, they had to continuously improve their abilities. The best way to do so was to train their divine arts, strengthen their bodies, and forget better spirit weapons. Algebra to them wasn't very important, and it was even something extremely dry and dull. It didn't improve their abilities at all, so throughout the generations, their attainments in algebra grew worse and worse. More and more divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven came to the sacrificial altar and looked down from above. They all took out longbows and pulled the bowstrings to shoot downward. Arrow lights pierced through the battlefield and killed many devils. There were some divine arts practitioners that were raising sword pellets and knife pellets to attack the enemies from afar as well. Qin Mu suddenly thought of something and asked in a hurry, "How did you guys forge this sacrificial altar?" The long braid girl was also skilled in archery and pulled her bow to shoot enemies. The sacrificial altar has existed for a long time. I heard from my dad that it was left in Supreme Emperor Heaven for the day we could no longer last. At that time, we could summon a god-sacred teacher who would come forward to help us. Now, Supreme Emperor Heaven is on the verge of falling, so the gods of Brilliance Injured City placed the altar in the center of the battlefield. With the deaths of everyone fighting, they sacrificed enough blood and flesh. Her face fell. Many people who were sacrificed were divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven. A sacrificial altar left behind from 20,000 years ago. Qin Mu looked at Saint Woodcutter, who was fighting far away. Over there, the battle was even more intense. Saint Woodcutter was bringing down the enemy's camp. The sacrificial altar should have been left behind by Saint Woodcutter for Supreme Emperor Heaven to summon him when won't be able to withstand the attacks any longer. In that case, his goal should be to drag the time for eternal peace. Qin Mu set up his moonjade eye and adjusted the direction. Light rays shot out and killed experts of the devil race. The range of moonjade eye was even greater than that of the bows, and its power was superior as well. He killed the strong practitioners of the devil race with ease, and Qin Mu targeted mostly the generals. Once they died, the devils lost their leaders, and with no command, it became hard for them to form any steady push forward. Even so, more and more heavenly devils were flooding toward the sacrificial altar. People had no time to just shoot the devils far away and were forced to hit whatever was beneath them. Under the sacrificial altar, corpses piled up into mountains, but the black swarm of devils still continued to come for them. They were about to reach the top of the sacrificial altar. Qin Mu put away his moonjade eye and grabbed his sword pellet to guard the sacrificial altar. The two parties fought fiercely on the top of the altar. The heavenly devil horde was abnormally brave. Its soldiers weren't afraid of death, and if it wasn't for the extraordinary abilities of Supreme Emperor Heaven's divine arts practitioners, it would have been difficult to block their attacks. Beside Qin Mu and the long braid girl, divine arts practitioners started to fall one by one. Even Qin Mu and the long braid girl's situation was bad. They had nearly died a few times under the attacks of the enemy. Less and less of their own remained on the sacrificial altar, and soon only 20-30 were left. Suddenly, a world-shaking shout came from afar, and the devils flooding toward the altar listened to the news. They then quickly fell back. It was like a burden had been lifted off the shoulders of everyone on the sacrificial altar. They took in deep breaths and collapsed onto the floor. All of them were covered in blood. Behind them, a resounding call of the bugle horns and drums rang out. An army of tens of thousands rushed out of Brilliance Injured City to chase after the escaping devil army. The long braid girl struggled to get up, wanting to chase after the deserters of the devil army, but her legs wobbled, and she could only sit down once again. Qin Mu looked at the army of Brilliance Injured City that was rushing into the distance. As he did so, he suddenly recalled something. "We've been through life and death twice together, yet I still don't know your name." "My name is Qin Mu. What's yours?" The long braid girl lay in a pool of blood while looking at one misshapen half of a sun. She calmed her breath and said, "My name is Xianxia. That day, I said many things to you, but you couldn't hear anything. I was lucky to have you beside me, and it was only because of it that I was able to endure through the fight. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to last that long." "Guess." She turned around with 2 small dimples in her cheeks. Guess, what did I say to you? Qin Mu shook his head. There were 2 worlds between us. I couldn't hear anything at all. Xianxia looked at the sky. Look, the sun is really big. Our Supreme Emperor Heaven had no sun, but these 2 were constructed by us with the help of a god. We called him Sun Creator, but before he completed them, Sun Creator God was killed by the devil gods. These suns are very magnificent, right? And magnificent? Qin Mu acknowledged against his will before curiosity got the better of him. So what did you say to me that night? Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 530, Jade-like Beauty, Rainbow-like Sword. Xianxia sat up and turned her back to Qin Mu. She unbuttoned her shirt to see the wounds under her snow-white neck. She took out a jade bottle and squeezed out the clotted blood in her wounds before applying the medicine on herself. I told you so many things that night that I don't remember them anymore. Her ears turned slightly red. Actually, that night when she had felt that she couldn't escape anymore, she told Qin Mu a lot of silly things, and some of those words could make even boys blush. However, she had said them daringly because Qin Mu wouldn't be able to hear them anyway. Unexpectedly, she lived through the night, and when she thought she would never see Qin Mu again, the nonsense she'd spoken that night became a different kind of emotion in her memory. Never had she even considered that she would be able to see the boy in the darkness to whom she had shared everything on her mind. Qin Mu raised his head to see the sun and barely resisted the urge to fly up the sky to grind the suns into dust. He then went around the girl and stretched out his hand to help her apply the medicine. Xianxia hurriedly covered herself up. Men and women should not touch. I'm an apothecary, and I only want to help you apply the medicine. I treat patients like their parents would and don't have any impure thoughts. Only when Xianxia remembered him saying that he was a somewhat famous apothecary that her heart eased. She looked curiously at how he applied the medicine on her, noticing that his hand techniques were indeed well trained. She asked suspiciously, Your algebra attainments are very high, so why are you also skilled in the art of healing? Qin Mu observed the wound on her chest in detail. I've learned the art of healing for over 10 years, while I've only studied algebra for 3 years. When you put it like that, I'm much better at healing. How long are you going to look? Xianxia said angrily and raised her hands to cover herself up. Qin Mu hurriedly stopped her and carefully pushed her clothes down to her shoulder. He said, I treat my patients as their parents would. And your skin is very white and your shoulders are very smooth. Stop. He frowned slightly. Xianxia's wound was left behind by a devil expert, and there was a divine art and devil qi within it, corroding her flesh and vital qi. It was hard to stop the bleeding for this kind of wound, and it was difficult to get rid of the devil qi too. The ointment that was applied to the wound had already been pushed black. It was evident that the medicinal energy had also been tainted by the devil qi. Qin Mu squeezed out the ointment that had turned black and took a sniff. He shook his head. This kind of ointment wasn't effective. Ow! This ointment is for pulling out the poison. After application, it collects some devil qi and has to be changed. Xianxia cried out in pain and took out a few bottles of ointment. For this kind of wound, I will have to apply it over a dozen times to completely pull the poison out. Your eyes keep sneaking glances, so let me do it. Qin Mu took out some medicinal ingredients from his taotai sack and used his method of refining pills to refine some medicine. Devil poison isn't poison. The problem is in the vital qi attributes of your god path technique that you cultivated clashing with the devil path technique. The ointment you're using isn't an ointment for pulling poison, but a variant of spirit pills which weren't refined to their best state, so they're in an ointment form. This kind of ointment just gets tainted by the devil qi, so it's a waste to use it to pull out the devil qi. While he was speaking, a pill furnace formed by vital qi appeared on his palm, and he just refined his pills within it. He reversed fire and water, mixed them, and used many other kinds of pill refinement methods which dazzled Xianxia's eyes. After a moment, Qin Mu dispersed his vital qi, and over a dozen pills landed in his palm. He crushed one and smeared it on Xianxia's wound. In my world, I'm Heavenly Saint Cult Master who is called Heavenly Devil Cult Master by the people. I have an understanding regarding the devil path. Devil is born in the heart. Whether one is a god or a devil, it's all in the heart. Anyway, I have experience in treating wounds made by divine arts of the devil path. Soon, Xianxia felt her wound begin to feel cool, and the devil chi was all pulled out. Her wound started to itch, which was the symptom of the wound starting to heal. My wound is healing so fast? Didn't you just say that you were only a little famous in that world of yours? Xianxia stared with her eyes wide open before secretly bringing her braids to cover her chest. She asked curiously, "A little famous apothecary can refine spirit medicine to counter the devil chi so quickly?" Qin Mu handed the rest of the spirit pills to her and grinned. "I was being humble. Actually, I'm not a little famous but very famous in that world. But you didn't understand it from my words, did you?" He couldn't help feeling pleased. "Most people can't hear it." Xianxia was bewildered. "You aren't going to help me apply the medicine?" Qin Mu walked toward other people to treat their injuries. "I was only examining the wound back there. You can apply the medicine yourself. Other people need to be saved too." Xianxia pulled up her shirt and looked at him, who was hurrying here and there. She thought to herself, "He indeed treats his patients like their parents would and doesn't have any impure thoughts. This person is a rare gentleman, just that he likes to glance around." Qin Mu treated the injured divine arts practitioners on the sacrificial altar before looking down at the countless people and heavenly devil horde soldiers lying on the battlefield. There were people moving the injured, and there were others finishing off the devils that were still alive. The vast battlefield was full of flames left behind by divine arts. They had ignited chariots, collapsed bodies, flags, and spirit weapons standing diagonally in the ground. Far into the distance, the killing was still continuing. The world Qin Mu had entered was strangely cruel. Even though he'd passed by many battlefields before, the sight in front of his eyes was still shocking to his heart. The art of healing can't save this world? Qin Mu shook his head. His healing could only save a few people. If he wanted to get to all the injured in this battlefield, he would need months. There was one small battle every 3 days and one big battle every 5 days. He didn't have the ability to heal everyone at such a rate. He raised his head to look at the sky. The irregular suns in the sky dimmed and became red. The 2 suns were fixed and never moved. It was probably also set that at a certain hour they would just start to dim. The god that created these 2 suns had good ideas, but his attainments in algebra weren't high. Qin Mu looked away, feeling that the suns were burning his eyes. Too ugly. If I continue to look at them, I won't be able to resist going to repair them. He moved slowly around the sacrificial altar while mobilizing his vital chi to execute Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. His spirit embryo and soul merged to form primordial spirit, combining his spirit and body into one. His primordial spirit stepped on the spirit platform and united the 6 directions. With sun and moon above his head, his vital chi moved, flowing through all parts of his body. His hair fluttered gently. In the fight, he had seen what made the divine arts practitioners of this world so powerful. Experiencing life and death of the battlefield had subconsciously changed his mentality for the better. Since the battle with first ancestor human emperor, he had been depressed. When fighting, he couldn't even execute his moves and was scolded fiercely by Butcher. It wasn't because he didn't dare to make a move. He just felt that no matter what move or what divine art he executed, they were all wrong. The reason why they were wrong wasn't because his confidence had suffered a setback from facing first ancestor human emperor. The problem lay in the fact that the clash had raised his horizons to a height he had never imagined before. When standing there and looking down on all the moves and divine arts he had learned before, he saw flaws everywhere. His horizons were high, but his foundation wasn't enough for him to change and enter the next realm, so he could not execute any moves or divine arts. He felt that they would be broken anyway and he would die in the next instant. He had treated his opponents as first ancestor human emperor, which was why he had this kind of feeling. Yet on the battlefield, Qin Mu didn't have the time to think about all that. The situation there changed every instant, so he couldn't care if there were any flaws in his moves. He could only execute them and kill all the powerful enemies or die. After the battle, Qin Mu felt that he had stepped to the threshold of a huge transformation. As long as he crossed that gate, he would definitely see a piece of blue sky, a vast road ahead of him. His body began to shine with splendid sunlight as his vital qi moved within him, connecting the spirit embryo, 5 elements, and 6 directions. The sun, moon, and stars gave off light that lit up the divine treasures, turning him into something like a person of light. Even the celestial being divine treasure in his body shone until the door to it could be seen. Meanwhile, below 6 directions divine treasure, a deep and dark door was also faintly discernible. It was the door of life and death realm which connected to Yudu. Qin Mu walked at a steady speed. In Little Jade Capital, he had observed the divine treasures of Little Jade Capital's god Qin Chongming for quite a long time. From then on, he had begun to improve his divine treasures and patch up whatever he was lacking. Roar! The vital qi in his body shook and gave off waves of dragon roars. Dragon qi coiled around his body, worming in and out to temper it. Suddenly, with his hands as knives, Qin Mu attacked while walking around the border of the sacrificial altar. The wind grew louder, and knives fell like rain. Midnight battle across stormy cities. The sun rose and jumped out of the surface of the sea. Sun on East Sea 1,000-layer waves. A golden knife adorned with white jade pierced the night with its light through the window. Man of 50 years, yet nothing made carrying knife in 8 wilderness all alone. After a crisis comes hope, and the whole journey becomes nothing but smoke. In the vast and bloody battlefield, Butcher's knife skills suddenly became very moving and alive, reflecting the calamity of the world. Qin Mu's knife skills became faster and faster. Suddenly, the knife lights vanished. The wind, the rain, the sun, the sea, they all vanished as well. Qin Mu put his fingers together into a sword, and his vital qi vibrated to form a sword thread. He gently flicked and smeared it, his sword skills incomparably exquisite. Suddenly, they became faster and faster. In the blink of an eye, his long sword swept through the air and danced above the sky of the sacrificial altar like a silver flood dragon. Qin Mu walked around the sacrificial altar while the sword light sweeping through the air, becoming faster and faster, more and more urgent. The calamity of Supreme Emperor Heaven had allowed him to gain something, and this subconsciously made him release all of his emotions. He learned through his sword skills, through his vital qi. Third form of sword picture, calamity of High Emperor. Yet when the calamity was at its fiercest point, Qin Mu suddenly dispersed all sword light and his sword finger suddenly tapped at the heart of his brows. It not only touched the physical place on his body, but also the heart of his spirit embryo's brows. All his spirit sword qi had been gathered in his finger. He had comprehended what calamity meant. Calamity was a disaster in which people struggled for their lives. It was finding hope in hell, a hero like Butcher using his knives to carve it for people, a human emperor like village chief undertaking hardship and toiling for everyone throughout his life, and also the struggle of people behind the back of a hero. It was the life of burying the dead every day. Qin Mu's 2 fingers stabbed forward, and a rainbow-like sword stretched across 10 miles. In the sky, one of the half-suns had dimmed, and only the sword light could be seen. While it shone in the sky, Qin Mu stood on the sacrificial altar in a daze. That move had had nothing to do with village chief's sword picture. Suddenly, the youth felt that he had his own path.